Well, good. At this time, we're going to call the meeting to order. Just want to welcome especially the board and then those from the public who join us tonight. We appreciate you coming as well. We're going to start off a little bit differently tonight than we normally would because we are all going to be sworn at, or rather sworn in. And we've done it somewhat unofficially, or let's say officially, this will be the photo op opportunity, and especially we weren't able to have the clerk, Ottawa County Clerk Justin Roebuck, with us before, and so we are tonight. We appreciate him coming, and I'm just going to ask Justin if he would make his way to the front here. And we are going to, as a group, it might make the most sense to come down in front and stand in front and go through the oath, and that way then those of you who want to take pictures, unless those of you who are interested, do you want the lectern look or do you want to be out in the front? Anybody have a preference? No preference? Why don't we, just to narrow the shot a little bit then for those with cameras, why don't we come down in front? What's that? Oh, right up in here? Okay, sure. Get that logo is right down below here, so. Let me at least slide this away. So, in here. One row. We'll do one row. Nice.
State of Michigan, according to the best of your ability.
I do.
Awesome. Congratulations, you guys. Welcome to a new term and a
Appreciate
new
it. Hey, before they're seated, Mr. Bosch, anyone else, if you want to get a picture, this would be a great time. You can come right up front here. If you want to single someone else and just get them, that's fine too. We're not offended. But why don't we take a group shot first off? Oh, a little tighter. There we go. All right. Okay, one more here. Okay, great. Perfect.
Well, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you,
I like that.
Justin. And I'll just say, if there's any who came tonight just for that moment, we won't consider it rude if you want to slip out. More than welcome to stay or go. It's up to you. All right. It's our practice to open our meetings with a word of prayer. And tonight, John Schwam, would you open us, please?
Well, thank you, Jim. Can we bow our heads, please? Our dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for this opportunity that we can gather together and go about your business here in Georgetown Township. We pray for your strength and your wisdom and your clarity, Lord. May we do things that are pleasing to you and to our fellow citizens here. We thank you for the wonderful people that work here, that make things go. We thank you for our first responders that put their life on their line virtually every day. We pray for our national government. We pray for our president, the things that are happening in Washington. We pray that your hand will guide. We thank you so much for what you've done for us and this opportunity to celebrate Thanksgiving. And we thank you for our founders that made all this possible. Please be with us this evening. We ask for your blessing. Amen.
Amen. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, at this time, I'm going to turn to our new clerk, Ryan Kidd, and have him call the roll, and we're going to see what his preference for style is here.
Looks like everyone's present.
All right, that's
the easy way.
A quick way to do it. You can keep us guessing if you want to do it differently.
Sounds good.
Before we approve the agenda, I just wanted to make mention tonight, I know we had sort of an unmeeting a week ago, but the comments I made at the outset of that meeting, which are not stricken from the record, I stand by, and I look forward to working with all of you and in a unified fashion, even if, as I said, we disagree from time to time. I'm really looking forward to it. Each of you brings interesting disciplines and interests and abilities to the table, and I think it's going to be really great for the township. A couple of things I had jotted down that I maybe wished I'd mentioned as part of that, and I promise you I won't do this too often, but I think I wanted to just reiterate the fact that our role here on the board is to make our township better. And I trust that each one of us has that as our goal, to do what we do to the best of our ability and with one another in such a way as to improve the lives of our residents. That's really what we want. You'll find, for those who are new to the board, you'll find that very few people will recognize you or know your name. It's not a high-profile position, and that's maybe a good thing sometimes. I can think back to when I was marching in the parade some years ago, and somebody shook my hand and said, "Good, get those bums out of there." And I'm like, "I'm in there right now." But, you know, they don't always recognize you, and that's not such a bad thing. But no, we are accountable to our community, obviously, and we know that we want to be in touch with people, but there are a lot of residents. I think we're close to about 51,000. It's a lot of people. I think 7th largest township in the state of Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, or at least close to that. That's a large township. As I say sometimes, I'll kid and say, you know, if you have 0.5% of the people that are unhappy with the board at any given time, that's more than 250 people. So what I'm saying is it doesn't take much to feel like people are maybe stirred up on an issue. Sometimes it gives perspective too, though, when you think of it that way, to say, well, I've heard, 5 people upset about X, and I've heard nothing else from anyone else, and then you have to try to weigh and really sense the community and connect with the community to find out, now, do they represent the community, or is that just a small fraction of people that disagree and that most people do approve? So it's all of our job to try to be in touch as best we can, both as a board and individually with the township. And obviously, if you had not been in touch and connected to the community, you would not have got elected. So every one of you obviously has a reach into the public here, and a lot of people have put trust in you. And so, you can't take too much of the credit or the blame. You just do your job as best you can. I wanted to commend, and I know Rob's not here, but all those involved in the Christmas tree lighting out there. We made it a subdued occasion this year, as so many things are. But what a beautiful sight out there driving in tonight and seeing that tree lit up. It looks great, and that whole plaza out there is looking really, really beautiful. So we're going to turn now to the approval of the agenda. We always begin in asking for a motion to approve and a second of the agenda. And then at that point, there can be discussion about whether there's any items to be added or moved. So is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. I'd like to lead off with one change and I probably should have led with it and made the motion myself, but we'll make it now an amendment to the motion on the floor. And that is number 8, zoning presentation. We were queued up with that last week to do that with Manette and Victor. It didn't work out for this time. So we are going to bump that, what I think is pretty interesting conversation, to probably the next meeting, the one in December. And I see Dan's nodding, so it sounds like their schedules are a go for them. So with that, I'd like to move to amend the agenda to remove item number 8. Is there a second?
Second. Support.
Okay. All in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? So it's passed. Now, it's still before you now, the approval of the agenda with that change. Are there any other items anyone wishes to either remove or add or change the order of, or are we ready to vote?
I would actually like to remove the items from the consent agenda and place them on the regular agenda. I have, at the very least, some questions about things. Primarily, some might just be because some of us are new.
Sure.
But at any rate,
Okay.
all of the items that are in the consent agenda.
And I think one member can just simply remove it. Yeah, doesn't require a vote. That's right. So it's so removed. And I think what it is it's going to remain on the agenda, but what you'd like to do is have that as a discussion point by point, so everyone understands that. Okay? Good? All right. Doesn't alter any numbers or anything, so we'll just keep that as item 11. Any other comments about the agenda before we take a vote?
I had some questions on the property purchase that we're working on
Yeah, so,
by Maplewood Lake.
yep. And are you suggesting you'd like Gary, to add that as an item as opposed to maybe bringing it up during discussion under point 18? I think either
can
way
do
would
that.
be acceptable.
Problem? I can do that.
Okay, all right. We'll make sure of that. So just, again, for the board members that are here, and I think it's worth noting, I would just say this, and this is no slight to those of you here from the public, but this is our board meeting for the month. Usually we'll have two. Sometimes there's one, but we'll always meet every month. And the way that this has been formed up here, this desk, it almost gives the impression that we're presenting something to the public, but in fact, it'd be more accurate to say that we're almost sitting at a table, and in fact tonight it's more so than usual because we have two of our members at tables. But when we convene like this on the second and fourth Mondays of the month, we are meeting as a board. And there are opportunities, as you well know, and as the public knows as well, for public input and discussion. But that is at the appointed times in the agenda. Obviously, there are other venues, other opportunities that the public has for input with the board. But I just want to remind the board itself that when we're doing business, we are essentially here meeting with one another, and our focus is on the board and the items before the board. So, having said that, though, we always take time, Gary, at the end, and you're welcome to bring that up. So, plan on that. All right.
Good.
Hearing no one else, is everyone ready to vote? All in favor of the amended agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Agenda is approved. Item number 9, communication letters and reports received for information. You will customarily see the sheriff's report. You'll see balance sheet reports and things of that nature. Of course, meeting minutes. These are pretty customary things. Sometimes you'll see correspondence in there that might be from either another segment of our township, maybe somebody from the library, or it could be something from the public that they wanted everyone to receive and be aware of and to read. And of course, there's nothing to prevent members from, as Gary was bringing up a moment ago, nothing to keep board members from bringing up those items then among discussion during the meeting. But at least as to those, we're acknowledging their receipt. The expectation is that all of you have reviewed them, and if you wish to discuss them or any point within them, that opportunity is there at the end of the meeting. Okay, item number 10. This is our initial public comment period. Doing a little over-explaining tonight. This won't be the typical, but given that, again, it's our first meeting as a new board, or first official, we'll always have 2 public comment periods at our meetings. The first one will be about the items on the agenda. Now, we used to publish the agenda and put it on a table. That was kind of pre-technology. We've generally relied on, in recent years, the publishing to the website, and even for those of you with phones, most have them. They'll pull them up right in the meeting and have it in front of them. And so you're able to follow along both on the screen, on your phone, if you wish to print it at home. Those are all options. But we want our public to come informed and able then during that first public comment period to speak to items remaining on the agenda. There might be one in particular that you want us to know your opinion about, okay, or have your perspective. One of them perhaps affects you directly. That is an opportunity for that. If you have a comment more generally, you want to talk about something that's on your mind and maybe we don't have it on our agenda tonight, there will be a second public comment period toward the end of the meeting, and you're welcome to, it's kind of like Open Line Friday and some of the talk shows, you're welcome to bring up the subject that's on your mind, okay? And just in that respect too, I would just note, I think sometimes it's a little awkward both for the public as well as sometimes for board members, because you may make a really good point, and it's not our time at that point to necessarily engage you in a discussion or a debate. As I was saying earlier, with it being a board meeting, sometimes we'll get off then on a tangent and not do our business. However, there's nothing to keep a board member from doing one of a couple of things. One, when we come to board discussion, which is more general, all right, at the end you might say, you know what, so-and-so who spoke tonight, I thought they made an excellent point. I'd like to see that matter referred to the committee, whatever, utilities committee or one of those. or I want to talk about it right now as a board. Or perhaps you'll think, I think I want to bring that up at the next meeting. I'm going to think about that for a while. Or maybe I want to connect with that person after the meeting. We've got website addresses on our website. We've got our phone numbers, and of course, we're here before and after meetings. So just because your item isn't necessarily responded to, you should not take as meaning that you weren't heard or that somehow we don't value your input. So that's just kind of the nature of how that order goes with our meetings. So having said that, this is an opportunity now for anyone in the public who wishes to address the board on items remaining on our agenda this evening. Please just step forward to the microphone, and we would ask that you would identify your name and your street address. And you'll have 3 minutes. I think that's Mr. Barr. I can't tell with that mask, but yeah, okay. How you doing, Joel? Welcome. Good to see you. I'm feeling good. Yeah, thanks.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Joel Barr, home address, 4393 Oak Meadow here in Georgetown Township. Longtime Georgetown Township resident. Love this community, and thank you all for your service. I'm here on an application for a sidewalk waiver for 303 Wisner. If you're not familiar with Wisner, it's because the road really doesn't exist in the real world today. It's an old road on what is now known as 44th Street. If you're familiar with the bend in 44th Street, right, if you're heading west from Kennewa as you're approaching Sunnybrook Country Club, the bend in the river is this property that I'm talking about. It's over 20 acres. It's been vacant land since, as Rick Bullhouse would say, Hector was a small puppy for a long time. And so we're asking that my client would like the opportunity to do something with this property. One of the reasons he wants to do something is he has a dream. He's owned a lot of property in this area historically. He's been a great member of both Kent and Ottawa County, and he has a vision. But one of the things is the request for the sidewalk waiver. The cost of putting a sidewalk along this stretch of 44th Street is really prohibitive to any development. There's a significant elevation change along this route. In fact, on the elevation change on here, you can see there's up to a 10-foot difference from the other side of the street. And so if you're on the north side of 44th, there's a big drop off there. And so putting in a sidewalk is going to be an incredibly expensive endeavor. More importantly, there's a sidewalk on the south side of 44th the entire way where all the residential homes are. On the north side, to the west, you have Sunnybrook Country Club. The odds of putting a sidewalk in that property are pretty slim. To the east, heading towards Kennewa, you've got a bunch of commercial property, no sidewalk there. So we were here over a year and a half ago requesting a waiver. It was denied. Didn't really get an explanation other than we like sidewalks. To be clear, I like sidewalks too. I live in a neighborhood here with sidewalks in phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 1 doesn't have sidewalks. I know what it means to have sidewalks in a residential area. But to require sidewalks along 44th Street in this busy stretch with the elevation change, with the existing residential property on the south side with the sidewalk and nothing along the north just really doesn't make sense, which is why we're asking for the waiver for this particular property. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll make a note as Joel's taking his seat. There are occasions, Joel and I see Mr. Stivey back there too, where you may have been retained by a developer or someone to speak to a particular issue or simply to be available for questions. We do make exceptions in our meetings for representatives on a particular subject or an item. So, for example, I know, Todd, you've spoken at different points or just simply stood there and waited to see if there are questions. You don't have to feel necessarily compelled in that capacity to say speak your piece in that 3 minutes at the outset, but you obviously did and did it well and stayed within the time, so thanks. Anyone else wish to address any of the items remaining on the agenda this evening? All right, seeing no one, then at this time we'll close that first public comment period. Next is item number 11, the consent agenda. And this has been, as we've said already, one which we're going to go over at least this time and as often as you like in the future, very specifically. Generally speaking, these are items that, again, are expected to have been reviewed, and certainly there are items there that get removed from time to time. Tonight, all of such items will be up for discussion. And so here, beginning then with 11.1, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting from October 26th and November 23rd. Is there any board member who wishes to address those previous minutes?
I just have a procedural question. Since we're going through consent agenda item by item, where in most circumstances we would just make a motion to approve the consent agenda, then are we going to, as we go, make a motion to approve each meeting's minutes and to approve the bills, or are we still going to do one motion at the end to approve consent agenda as a bulk?
If I may, I think for tonight we're going to take them one Roman numeral at a time. There's four of them, I think. 1, 2, 3, and 4. They may have subparts, but at least for tonight, let's say we'll take them one part at a time. So I'll put a motion on the table to approve the minutes of the previous meetings from both October and November.
Support.
Moved and supported. Again, any discussion on that point?
Yes. It might be beneficial, depending on the outcome of the discussion, to even separate the two out. My concern with the October 26th minutes is that it happened. By Zoom.
You lost your mic there.
Still flashing green.
Okay, there you go. I hear you.
Okay. With that meeting entirely by Zoom, it was not open truly to the public, and approving of any decisions made during that meeting is not really the appropriate thing to do. I would actually suggest the Open Meetings Act, MCL 15.270, essentially allows for, it's kind of talking about the negative side of it, decisions that are invalidated. But what it does is it opens up the opportunity to reenact any potentially disputed decisions so that they can come within conformity of the act, and that when the official vote is made on such items, that if it's done then at a properly, public meeting that's available to all, such as this meeting is, that those decisions then, I forget the terminology, they just talk about reenacting those decisions. So essentially having that whatever discussion points were, not just voting on the agenda to accept what happened, but to essentially, whether it be at our next meeting or what have you, have those decisions talked about at a truly open meeting that conforms with the Open Meetings Act and the constitutional requirements. And as soon as that's done, then it essentially validates whatever decisions were made. So that's a suggestion, which is why it's different than the minutes for the 23rd, because the 23rd, I guess on the point of the 23rd, my only, concern is that it doesn't seem to really indicate it. It just says we were all available by Zoom. It doesn't indicate those of us who are physically available here in the township. And also my motion to adjourn was not a simple, it's the end of our meeting, we have a motion to adjourn, but rather it was a motion to adjourn with a specific purpose of meeting again on today's date to meet in public at a meeting open and physically available to the members of the public. So I would ask that those parts be amended in the minutes for the November 23rd meeting.
Jim, may I ask Dan?
Sure.
Dan, according to our lawyer, did we have a meeting last Thursday? You asked his opinion? Oh, I'm sorry. Last Tuesday when we had our Monday, I'm sorry. Was that considered
I've never asked whether there's interpretation of anything about that meeting, if that's what you're asking.
Okay.
Did we follow the procedures that's set forth by them? Yes, but I'm not asking that question. Tonight before you, though, you have the minutes to approve or not approve. That's really the issues before you. Whether you make a change from that and not approve them, then other issues might come. But today you have the minutes, whether they're reflected, and they can be amended, or things can be added or changed. If the board so desires. Is that your question?
Well, I was from the lawyer. Was that considered? Did we break any laws by having that meeting? In his opinion?
No, not that I'm aware of. But I didn't specifically ask him to review that meeting. If that's what you're asking.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to address the motion before us, which has to do with the minutes from October and November? Okay.
I guess I have a question. So, what Catherine's laying out is the fact that if you didn't have an open meeting on October 23, the decisions that were made there could be overturned later on. Is that the way I'm understanding that?
I think Catherine can speak for herself. She would say yes, I think. I would disagree, or I would say that there's competing legal authority, as I did at the last meeting. Such that it's almost something that, for one to definitively say, and even then you could choose to respect or not respect what the court would decide, but the court would have to decide, no matter how strongly one side or the other on that issue feels. Literally, there are people meeting all over the state in various venues and ways and so on, cities, townships, and the like, that are likewise in derogation of the law if, in fact, Catherine's right. Okay? And I know she's convinced she is. So I would only say to you, it's not as clear-cut as one side is right and the other is wrong. That's why we have courts. I'm not sure it'll ever reach that point, Gary, where they'll actually make a definitive ruling. Hopefully this will all go away. You know, we've all been hoping that. But I'm at least taking my shot at trying to address what you're saying.
So, wouldn't we be better off to side on error and revisit those things and revote them in as an open meeting? I mean, it doesn't look like the agenda had that many things on it. So if we were to present them next month in an open meeting on a different agenda and we voted for them, then we'd have our bases covered and not have a problem with a possibility, a legal issue down the road.
Okay. I hear your perspective. Anyone else?
To argue the flip side of that coin, though, the board that those agenda items were before is no longer the board that's seated. And so I think that having a different mix of people revisit items that a seated board had already decided on, and we could argue the legitimacy of the virtual meeting, but we were operating to the very best of our knowledge at the time. There was no ill intent in choosing to be virtual, but, you know, we thought that we were making the best decisions that we could at that point. Catherine has brought up some points, but those points weren't brought up prior to the October 26th meeting. So just to play devil's advocate a little bit, I hear what you're saying. Let's re-vote on all of them. But the board that those items were before is just a different group now. So that feels a little bit awkward.
A couple of things going on. There's the question of, first of all, typically we think of, are those minutes accurate as to what took place? I mean, that's usually the essence of what we're looking at. I don't think anybody's disputing whether they're accurate or not. What's being made, or the argument's being made, is that they may be accurate, and those things may have occurred, and people may have voted in that fashion. However, it was, you know, unconstitutional, or it was against the law to have done so. That's an entirely different argument, whether or not you think it was constitutional or not. I think the motion before the board, at least as it's been made here, it's not been amended or changed, and no one's made any other motions, is, are these the minutes, and are these minutes accurate? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Now, do you want to attack decisions of a prior board and somehow nullify them? I think it now becomes a legal sticky wicket. And I don't know, is it something that I can speak for myself only, I suppose, that any of us is versed in sufficiently to say, I'm willing to vote and overturn the will of a prior duly elected board.
Thanks for articulating where my heart was better than I just said.
Okay, well.
I would like to address what Gary was saying with the original question kind of being referring to what I was trying to get at. And yeah, so what I was talking about is, I guess, maybe twofold. So you kind of made it stated a little bit more clearly that in the event that there is a possibility, whether a court is going to follow the Constitution or follow the law, well, that's always up for grabs. But there's 100% possibility that the decisions that were made at the last meeting could be invalidated due to the manner in which the meeting was held. And so that is a concern, but something that I guess I was assuming would go along with that isn't just the possibility that the meeting decisions might be set aside because of that, but I think we owe it to the people of the township that we represent that, this is something where it should have been happening all along, and whether we're a board of attorneys or we're a board of school teachers or we're a board of dentists or garbage collectors or whatever, the point is we each took an oath to uphold the U.S. and Michigan Constitution, so saying we didn't know what was in them isn't really a good reason to not follow the Constitution. So my concern is twofold, that the possibility that it could end up being legally challenged and there could be some issues with that. We would be heading off at the path, even the need for somebody to bring something up from that October meeting. And that's the one that's before us right now. So as I understand it, the other meetings prior to that might have been conducted in the same manner. If I remember my reading of the Open Meetings Act correctly, those would not be at issue legally because I think you have to bring it within 60 days of a decision being made. So if a citizen were to make a complaint in court to try to invalidate a decision, so that's why that particular set of minutes would be important, but that's also the set of minutes that's on the agenda for us to approve of. And to the extent that it's also, to the point that it was a totally different board, essentially, that was voting on those, at least, three of us were not present, unless you guys were present. I wasn't present at that meeting. So, at the very least, I would think the three of us would have to abstain from voting on whether they were accurate. Not that I would argue that they are, inaccurate, but we wouldn't know. But it just seems like it would be the prudent thing out of respect for the people in our community, out of respect for the oath that we took to uphold the Constitution, regardless of our educational or career background, as well as just to try to not have any kind of possible legal expenses incurred later on unnecessarily by just simply putting whatever items that were approved from that October agenda onto the upcoming agenda just to take care of those. But, and again, that's a different issue, which is why I guess I would ask, perhaps I would make a motion to amend your motion to approve the agenda. I think it was your motion, so that it's separating those two meeting minutes out because it's a totally different scenario. People might have concern with one, not the other, or vice versa. For me, the meeting minutes from the 23rd, I'm just asking that because we didn't really vote on anything that would need to be redone in a sense. I would just ask for points of clarification to be made, or essentially descriptive words to be added to that, not necessarily to entirely redo anything or have to re-talk about anything that happened in relation to those minutes. So that would be my motion to amend, is to separate those two out.
I would support that. Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any discussion about the motion to amend my motion, that is to separate out our vote on the minutes October versus November? On that motion alone, are there any comments anyone wishes to make?
Catherine, if I can ask you, are you talking about Carol Skoma and Rich Vanderklok and Jason Minier invalidating what they did at our last meeting? Or are you asking for clarification? It seems to me that, as Jim had said, normally if the minutes are not accurate, that's what you challenge. But it seems that you want to challenge that we shouldn't have had a meeting altogether, And then if that's the precedent, what about the meetings we've had since last spring? I know you said, well, after 60 days, we don't have to be as concerned about a possible lawsuit, but it seems like we're opening ourselves up to a lawsuit simply by taking what a previous board had voted on and invalidating it.
I wouldn't be saying that we're invalidating anything. The point is, it either is or it isn't valid. And the thing is, the Constitution, whether somebody likes it or not, it's there. The requirements are there. So it's very clear that we're supposed to have a government of the people. And by, having, I don't even know what that is, what that camera's going to, but assuming it's going to YouTube, is that what that was going to?
No.
So I don't watch TV at all. So whether it's YouTube, which I think that one is, or something like that, offering up information that's happening simultaneously so people can see it is different from having an entire meeting conducted by Zoom. For example, my husband was actually here last week, and I guess he and I didn't think to talk about how to get into the meeting with him ahead of time. And the entire time he was sitting there, he was having a hard time hearing you guys, and couldn't figure out where the Zoom link was. And after the meeting, I said, well, it was on the agenda, and you had to click, and then but it brought up a good point that it's unlike, the Michigan Supreme Court. When they do their hearings and they put it on YouTube, you can search Michigan Supreme Court, look, they're going live right now, and you can just pop on there and watch it, and it's available for the public to see. Totally different scenario than a Zoom meeting where you can't do any kind of search. There's not like a Georgetown Township Zoom channel where you can just go and regularly see. You'd have to have a certain meeting link. And so at any rate, it's not, my point wasn't to try to rehash all of those pieces or go into all the other ways that it's not constitutional or ways that we violated state law on that point. It is what it is, so whether we vote to reapprove essentially or renew, whatever the word was, reenact is the language of the statute, whether we vote to set aside those items from the October meeting to our next meeting or whatever you guys think would be appropriate, that's not us invalidating. That's not me saying I think we should invalidate every decision of the individuals you're talking about. It's not personal at all. It has nothing to do with the individuals. I'm concerned that whatever we do it the right way. So you took an oath, I took an oath, everybody took an oath. So we know whether we knew it then or we know it now. The fact is, it's undeniable we know what we got to do now. So I'm just trying to figure out a way that we can do the right thing and preserve, I reviewed the minutes from the October meeting before our last meeting, so at this present time I don't remember anything that's on there, to be honest. It's not an individual or specific concern I have about an agenda item, but more so to make sure that whatever decision, it's done the right way and avoiding any.
You bring your comments to a point here just because of our agenda.
That's fine.
Okay. All right.
We were incredibly careful as we set this up, and we got legal advice, and I would strongly oppose, if it has to do with anything that's not correct in our minutes, absolutely. But if it's to resubmit, revalidate, or something like that, I'm strongly against it, and I'd want to get legal advice and even get legal support possibly from our lawyers. I think it'd be absolutely wrong. I'm strongly against it.
And that's not the motion that's before us. The motion before us is just to accept or approve, I don't remember the supervisor's language, but to accept or approve the October 26th meeting minutes. It seems like we either vote to accept them or we vote not to, right?
Let's narrow the scope here. So there's a motion that's been made and supported as it relates to these minutes to split them between November and October. Let's take a vote on that, okay? Unless there's further comment. All in favor, say aye.
Yeah, I would say I do have a question as far as, and that would probably be directed to Dan, I think, or Catherine. If we were to not approve the minutes of the October meeting, what does that mean?
We'll come to
that.
Does
it invalidate it?
Are we going to address this motion and then we can address the substance?
Chair, you have to decide if you want me to.
We have a motion. We can't leave. We can't wander off into the original motion here. We need to decide on the motion that's before us now.
For clarity, what your motion that you're
My
trying
motion
to vote
was
on
to approve the minutes for both October and November. Your motion was to amend my motion to approve them separately.
But you're asking for a vote on my
On
amendment
that amendment, yes.
to separate them out.
Correct. So on that point alone, is there consensus? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, so we can deal with them separately. Now to the question of them. Why don't we do this too, just to narrow it further? I think as it relates to November, all I hear Catherine saying is she'd like to perhaps massage a little of the verbiage. I'd like to hear that in the form of a motion then. How would you move? Are you prepared to make a motion to amend as to how the meeting, I guess, concluded?
Well, the two pieces, I would move that the beginning portion of the, I believe it's the second paragraph of the minutes. I don't know if they were up there, but is it possible to put it up for anybody that's in here? Anyway,
Put the first meeting up.
for it just
November.
Yep. We're on the October, right?
There you are.
right. So yeah, where it starts due to this, I would move that there be some sort of recognition of those of us who are physically here, is all. And then down at the bottom where it mentions my motion to adjourn, that it specify that the motion was to adjourn until today's date when we would meet in person to discuss the item.
Okay, you've heard that. Anybody wish to second that motion? Are you making a motion then to amend the minutes? Okay, is there a second for that motion?
I'll support that.
Okay, moved and supported.
We're just asking for a little bit clarification.
Just two clarifications, that's it.
No, I know, but it says, I thought it said exactly, so we're missing something. I want to know what we're missing.
To adjourn the meeting next Monday, November 23rd, 7 p.m. at the Georgetown Township office.
Okay. November 30, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to clarify that it's to be physically present at the meeting.
Okay. That's why I misunderstood. I want to know what we missed, so thank
To
you.
be physically present at the meeting and at the outset to indicate that 4 of them were present on site and identifying who they were. So with that clarification and her having made the motion, Catherine, that is, does anyone wish to second that motion, at least for the point of discussion and voting? Anyone?
I'll second.
All right, it's been seconded. That's right, Gary, you had. Okay. I see 2 of you wishing to speak. We're only talking about November now, so okay. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm good.
All right, John?
Okay, does this mean that those of us that were not here were violating the law?
Listen, John, you're getting to it. I mean, I don't blame you, but
Well, I've never heard where we've gone through something like this in such detail, and so I feel like I'm walking through a minefield. And I'm just very, very careful.
But back to the point of how the minutes themselves should reflect only what was accurate, what was said, what was done. It is true who was here, and it is true who was not. Whatever the legal implications of that, those things are truth, right? So, while I would say, and I'll say it all day long, I think Catherine overstates the confidence in her position. I'm not persuaded. I think if we're in violation, I think the U.S. Congress is in violation. I think every body all the way down, Justin Roebuck back there probably conducts a number of public meetings in the fashion of a Zoom. So we're all in trouble, okay? I realize Catherine is very adamant about her position, and she speaks very eloquently about what she believes, but she's not right in saying that this is what the consensus is. That is, I consider it a straw man when I say, well, you know, we can't say we don't know what's in the Open Meetings Act, or that, you know, certain people are of the people and the rest of us are not. There is a genuine dispute over this very point here. Catherine feels strongly one way, others feel strongly the other way. I don't personally, and I'm not hired, and neither is she, to be the township council. Okay, we have counsel for that. So we may need to appeal to them on the question when coming up with October, but I will simply say on behalf of my own self, I am not nervous about that. Okay? I am not nervous about it one way or the other. I think it would accurately reflect what was, who was here and who wasn't. You could say those that were here could be nervous too. I don't know. To me, it's like, it's okay. That's my perspective.
To even ask the question is almost to me pronouncing guilt. But I do agree with what you've just said.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's fine to reflect in that fashion. Anyone else? All right. So only on the motion to amend the November minutes as so stated in those two places. I know Rod got it accurately, and it's been seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. Now before us is, or rather what could be put before us now, is the October meeting minutes and whether or not anyone wishes to make a motion in relation thereto. And as I said before, I draw a line between what happened and who was there and what decisions were made versus the ultimate legality of those decisions. And I think if there's going to be a decision on that point, I would seek legal counsel on behalf of the township, because I don't think we are in a position to make a decision like that. I can say, as someone has said, well, might we face legal consequence? I can tell you for sure that if we overturn those minutes, we will. We will have legal fees we will incur, because certain actions that we're taking in reliance upon those decisions, that can't simply be broken. So think carefully about that issue. There is no motion before you. Does anyone wish to put a motion before the board? Well, I strike that. I'll put a motion for the board to approve the October minutes of the board as drafted.
We already have that motion.
Yeah, but then we split it, Dan. Then we split it.
Then it's already still there.
All right, so it's still there on the table then for October. Okay. So my motion is still on the table. Does anyone wish to either speak to that or to make their own motion?
I think they're an accurate representation of the discussions that were had at the meeting, and I believe that that is our job as we accept meeting minutes, that they are an accurate representation of the dialogue and conversations that took place during that meeting.
I strongly agree.
My concern would be that it's the approving of the minutes is to approve of whether decisions were in fact made or not, and the point is the decisions were not allowed to even have been made in that meeting. So to that extent, I think there is a fairly easy fix to that, if you will, that brings things in compliance as well as allows the people truly an opportunity to be heard on those issues, which would be under MCL 15.270, talking about reenacting possible disputed decisions so that they're in conformity with the act. That would be my recommendation. At the very least, I would think that the three of us who were not present at the meeting would have to abstain.
Okay, is there a motion? Or is it my motion sufficient? We'll go to my motion otherwise.
My motion doesn't exactly modify yours, so I wasn't sure if I should make my own at that point or if we have to close out yours before I would make that.
No. Anyone else wish to speak to this? Otherwise, I'll take a vote on my motion to approve the minutes.
I guess I'd go back to my first question with Dan. What happens if the board does not vote to approve the previous minutes?
I mean, that's obviously a legal question or challenge. In my mind, this motion truly reflects, is this what occurred? It has no basis on whether the subsequent would be challenged. I mean, clearly the minutes reflect how the meeting was conducted. It reflects what was occurred in that meeting that was conducted via Zoom, and you're just confirming or approving the minutes that reflect that. That's my opinion, but I'm not...
Michael, is there something in those minutes that you feel like is not an accurate representation of the conversations that we had, albeit electronically?
No, I'm just listening to everything, and I'm asking a question. And I guess the other thing Catherine makes the point about abstaining from voting, which is what I did in 2016 when I came in November, because I wasn't going to vote on minutes that I wasn't at the meeting for. So that's why I asked the question, is what would happen.
And that's why I just asked you the follow-up question. I was going to ask the same thing of John and Jim, because I feel like it's an accurate representation, and there are four of us, which is a board majority, to accept the meeting minutes that we're all there. So Jim, do you feel like there's anything in those minutes that is not an accurate representation of the conversations we had?
I'm ready to vote.
John, do you feel like it's an accurate representation
Yes, I
of
do.
the conversations that we had? Michael, do you feel like there's anything in there that isn't an
Point of order, Chairman.
Yeah, we do have a motion before us. At this point, rather than take votes individually like that, we'll call for a vote, and it's perfectly acceptable. In fact, it's even logical, I think, that if you weren't here and weren't part of the board, you probably don't necessarily want to vote on it, all right? So, because you weren't here, you don't know. So, having said that, why don't you call the roll there? Mr. Clerk, we'll do that this time.
All right. Supervisor.
Yes, support.
Clerk, I'm going to abstain. I was not there. Treasurer.
Yes.
Becky Steele.
Yes.
John Schwam.
Yes.
Gary Belding.
Abstain.
And Catherine Henry.
I'll abstain.
All right, the motion is carried. Thank you, Brian. Item 11, Roman numeral 2, approval of the bills. You'll receive utility bills, visa bills, and the like, and we expect everyone to review. And you'll see this commonly come before you. And I did say earlier we were going to break it up according to Roman numerals, so believe it or not, we'll have an individual motion just on the approval of the bills this evening. I'll go ahead and put that motion before the board. Anyone wish the second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion about the bills you received copies of?
Kind of a point of clarification, not specifics on items yet, but and I even before being on the board, I've tried looking through these. I don't know if other members of the public have. I think this packet was like 93 pages, and quite a bit of it was the financial aspects. There were quite a few, and I believe I still have them all in the same order, but my concern or question is, so which of these, because some of these were more just reports, and some of them were actual items that we are going to be essentially voting to approve. Is there a way that we can try to identify based on what is actually on the printout of these items, which ones are being requested that would be part of the motion?
Would you go ahead and speak to that, please?
You're asking for clarity of which ones is what you're asking for clarity?
Which documents are the ones that were part of the motion?
Basically, the way it's been done in the past, and the board can change this, is they're split up by the method of payment, is what you see there, is this how we paid them. And so some the board approves retroactively, and some the board approves, like the checks before we disperse those are held.
And I don't mean to clarify. My question, you're kind of getting into the weeds so much of the detail, which I appreciate, and I would want to know, but I'm actually I was struggling trying to find out which one was which. So I figured I would actually save my question because the public might have the same question. As far as when you have a PDF listed on there, I know they're all, but when the packet prints out together, and now that I'm here, I have things stapled, I think, appropriately, because I printed it before, but if anybody else is trying to follow along, where does this start? Is there a way that you could just tell me which one we're talking about? There's titles on these. I just don't know which one we're starting with.
I guess I'm a little bit confused. We're asking you to approve all 5 of those.
Yep, and we have so many spreadsheets and financial reports. None of them match the title there on the actual title printed, is all I'm saying. So now that I have it printed, I can't see which one is which.
I'm not sure what report you're looking at. Why don't you bring up the bills? Like, bring up the last one you bring up. Is this the report you're looking at?
I was looking at all of them, so I'm just trying to match up to make sure. Okay. And that particular one is the one that's 4 pages then. That first PDF is all. I printed it all as one thing,
okay,
so that's why it didn't show up this way.
Yes.
Okay. And the next one is the 2-page. Okay.
Those are the utility bills. Go ahead to the next one. These are the property tax payments. This is what would have been the October 26th meeting, which we did not have. And this is the last set. So you can see the vendor listed.
Okay.
What it's for.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I knew exactly what what piece we were voting on there.
Okay, all in favor of approving the bills this evening, say aye.
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 Opposed? And that's passed. Item 11, Roman numeral 3. This is the approval of the layout of the preliminary plat of Allward Estates West, number 5, which is probably why Mr. Savvy is here. Does anyone wish to place a motion before the board?
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Discussion about this particular plat. We've all received information about the preliminary plat.
I do have some questions. My first question is actually, I believe this was part of, in part of the packet, there was an option for a motion. I'm assuming, Dan, was this part of the original packet that was just presented just to the Planning Commission. That wasn't necessarily presented in the light of what was coming directly to us, but what was originally presented to the Planning Commission?
It goes to the Planning Commission and to us, yes.
Okay.
This board.
So was this, and I probably just missed it somewhere, but was the only spelled out motion I saw was the one that said option for motion, and I wasn't sure then if that actually word for word then was in fact what was voted on, or if there were changes, because there were some, looks like some suggested like carve outs or, you know, changes or requirements, so.
Right, we're approving the same thing recommending to approve the same thing the Planning Commission approved. Was asking. I don't know what you're looking at on that sheet.
It's whatever was part of this. So is there a possibility to pull up what that wording was then so I can make sure that I'm looking at the right thing?
Sure. From their minutes you want to look up?
Scroll down to page 4 or page 3.
The motion.
Is that the motion that was voted and approved word for word by the Planning Commission, or was that simply what was presented to them and then I modified that?
That was what was presented to them, but they did not modify it.
They did not modify it. Okay. I guess I would have questions. So what I'm going to refer to is page 3 and 4. That's page 3, and then the one that's right below that, I'm assuming the way that you're viewing it there would be page 4. If we, in fact, look at that page 4, there were several pieces in there that looked like, if I'm reading this correct, that it said there were needs or comments. So there's it looks like there's needs, or, you know, I don't want to sound insulting, but I'm reading the word needs to be more of like deficiencies or things that weren't quite met yet. So deficiencies for setbacks that are required by zoning ordinances, sidewalks, streetlights, garages. I'm not sure what is meant by variance in item E. And then it looks like item F is just simply indicating that the location of existing vegetation was not even provided, and that would have to be provided. So my concern is that's a lot of things going on. I mean, just look at an item of sidewalks alone. We have another piece where we're talking about a vacant piece of property, and there's a lot of discussion, and it sounds like this is at least the second time the individual brought forth a request just for a one contiguous sidewalk that goes on the frontage of a property. That could be one, huge project alone, and yet that's just kind of amongst many other concerns or needs or deficiencies that are noted here. And I didn't see anywhere in the notes where those concerns were really being addressed. So I'm not sure if that's something that if there's answers to those, or.
This is just the preliminary approval, and so listing all the things they have to correct before they'll get final preliminary. And so there's there's 3 steps, and this is step 1. So the first step is listing all those things they have to correct and do, and then they'll get their construction or final preliminary approval before they'll get their 3rd step when they do all those things and get their final approval. So this is the general layout before they start doing all those things, and we want to change the layout significantly. That's what you're asked to be approved today. Are we acceptable with this general layout of the lots? And or do we want to add other things we want to be corrected prior to that final preliminary approval?
So I guess my question would be kind of in conjunction with that versus what's on the prior page. It's talking about, it kind of spells out sidewalks will be provided by the individual property owner. Each house would be required to have a minimum of 400 square foot attached garage with a minimum of 2 parking spaces, et cetera. There's specific things. Are all of these things, are they then, I just feel like I didn't have enough information to see that. It sounds like those by themselves were significant changes to the overall plan. Are those just that they weren't specified, or?
Some could be each. I mean, I don't have each specific one. We've asked the staff not to come tonight because of the obvious reasons, but so those are some different issues, but those will all be addressed prior to the next level, which the Planning Commission can either waive, accept, or require them. But the first step is do you like this general layout? And you got to fix all these things before you get to the next level. So.
I guess my last question, I think, is my last question for you on this. The wording on item 1 of page 3 says that many lots are affected by a drainage easement that's involved. That can be kind of scary. I mean, I've known properties in other communities that, you know, when there's a drainage easement and several lots are affected, you can have one significant, you know, flood or something, and then if it's not done quite right, I mean, you can have catastrophic events. Is that, and to me, I don't know, maybe this is something Gary with his expertise too, or you, Dan, would have an answer for, and maybe it was point of discussion in the original planning commission meeting, but it seems that if we just assume all these things are, you know, easy enough to just check off a box later on down the road, we might be setting up people for failure. Is that something that was more...
So what happens is, so this is step 1, do we like the general layout? Now they have to come for step 2, which will be final preliminary. But now that they've got the general layout, then they have to go to the county, like the Water Resource Commission, and get their approval. They have to go to each of those other agencies before they can get that next step and start construction. So that's why they want to generally do that. Now, if you approve this, then Todd has a whole bunch of work to do to design this and get those other approvals. I'm not sure. I'm sure of this being a later phase. That's quite far down the road already, but that's kind of how that next step would go. So the developer's engineer is here too, if you have any other questions too, specifically for them.
Have you heard something, Todd, that you wish you could address or not?
I would like to hear it.
Yeah.
If you could go back to the questions that you thought were deficiencies. This is how Manette does this every time.
Todd, stop on the mic so they can hear you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, this is how Manette does her report every time. Needs or comments. So it's a comment really. So under property lines and required setbacks shown and dimensioned, and she put on their setbacks. I don't know why. All of the lots have the same setbacks. They're all shown on the plan. So there is no deficiency there. Sidewalks, she says sidewalks. We have a note on the plan that sidewalks will be provided on each lot. So it's not a deficiency. I don't know why she puts that in there. Signs and exterior lighting, street lights. We have submitted a street light petition, which is required as part of the preliminary plat. So I don't know if that's just a reminder for everyone, but it's not a deficiency. Garages, I think she puts that in there because every lot is required by ordinance to have at least 400 square feet of garage space. That's really doesn't have anything to do with the plat. When someone comes in for a building permit, if they ask for something 380 square feet, it'll be denied. It has to be at least 400 square feet. Location, covenants, right-of-ways, abutting roads, but variance. There are no variances required for what we've submitted. So again, I don't know why she puts that comment in there. Location of existing vegetation. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Parkway Association. I don't even know what that note's all about. We do show existing vegetation. We show there's an existing wood line on the property, so that is on the plan. If you go to the motion.
Is there anything that you could provide about I think you addressed all the other things on that page except then the drainage. I mean, you mentioned that you were somewhat in the process.
Well, correct. This is the very first step, and there are drainage easements on really on just about every lot these days. There's a drainage area on the back line usually, sometimes down the sideline, and those easements are required by the Water Resources Commission. It's where the water will flow ordinarily, or it's where a pipe perhaps is underground. So I think, honestly, she puts that on there so that if someone comes and wants to build within a drainage easement, the township is on record to say the drainage easement was established in the preliminary plat on the final plat. So you can't ask for a variance to build in a drainage easement. That's what I've been told is why she put some of that language in here. It's to protect the township from a lot of potential variances that might come up because it's been established. There's no reason you have to build within the drainage easement. So was there any other one that you had a concern about?
You were just saying that it's a new drainage easement that will be made as part of the whole development.
Correct.
And you're just essentially your understanding of it is that's just going to then put everybody on notice for future if they're trying to do anything else with development or modification of the property, that the drainage easement basically can't be affected in that way, and that potential thing is what the many lots are affected language. That's what it's just talking about.
Correct.
Okay. Well, see, that sounds a lot less scary than the way that it reads here. So I really appreciate you explaining all these things.
Yeah, and like I said, that we do a lot of these each year, and that's just kind of the format that has been put forward. And yeah, she checks her boxes. But no, as far as I'm concerned, there are no deficiencies or additional revisions that have to be made to this plan other than to go through our final design now, which does require the road commission, the drain office, or the water resources commission's approval for drainage before we come back for the next step. So, okay.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you. I appreciate this.
Anyone else for Mr. Steiner? No. Okay.
All right.
You will see him from time to time and others, and he's always knowledgeable and able to answer questions. So we appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Yep. And frankly, the questions Catherine's asking, these are logical questions that I think we've all asked at different times and should continue always to ask. It's one of the reasons we wrestle sometimes when we begin a new term is, do we start with board workshops and sort of take hypotheticals and walk through them and get familiar with terms and procedures and so on? Because the township does things a little different maybe than the next one. Or, what are the different laws? How does the plan commission interplay with the township board? And believe me, we're always learning these things no matter how long you've been on the board. But there are sometimes things that can be, it's a front-end download, when you're new. And I know, Dan, you try to balance between saying, should we set aside a workshop versus should we tackle an issue maybe each time, we meet, and kind of knock things off that way too. But, sometimes a workshop is something at least to think about. It can be an environment where there's just a lot of free flow of discussion and it's not about a particular decision being made at that time, but everybody being able to ask every question you can think of. You go, okay, I get it. I'm learning how that all comes together. So, the food for thought, we can do more of that. But at this point then, with those questions having been asked, is everyone ready to vote on this motion? Yes? Okay. So the motion before you is for the approval of the layout of the preliminary plat of Allward Estates number 5. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Item 11, Roman numeral 3 is passed. Thank you for coming, Justin. All right. 11-4. All right. Anyone wish to place before the board approval of the meeting schedule for 2021 for boards and commissions?
Support.
Thank you. It's been moved and supported. All right.
I do have a question.
Yes.
In previous years, we have scheduled 2 meetings in each of the January, February, and March.
Yep.
I noticed that there's only 1.
Yep.
Just wondering what the...
Yep. This is my impression twofold, Brian. So on the one hand, it is, I think, a reality of maybe schedules, like who's when and where and out of town, and oftentimes very helpful to have, Dan and or Rod, and so if they're both unavailable or one of them, it sometimes can affect it, or in this case, not myself. But the other is I think that we didn't have a lot on the docket or waiting. However, I don't think anyone here is gonna fight, the norm of what has been. And so if people would rather place 2 meetings on the schedule and then if need be decide whether it's necessary to cancel one, that's fine too. We can go that direction.
Yeah, I guess my concern on that would be to have it scheduled earlier in the month, just in case there is something that came up. like having it at the late January 25th, something were to come up, we would have to scramble to have another one because we only have one scheduled for that month and we're required to.
Okay. All right. Good comment. Michael,
I was going to say I was going to pull that from the consent agenda, but didn't need to. But I wanted to recommend adding January 11, February 8, and March 8. So I don't know if that needs to be an amendment to your motion to.
I think so. I would
think it's not that formal. It's just a
motion.
Yeah, it's an amendment to my motion to approve as was presented. So you said January 11,
February 8, and March 8.
And March 8. Okay. Is there a second for Michael's amendment of the original? Okay. The second.
And that is just, to be clear, that's for our board meetings, the township board meetings.
Yes, correct. That's right. That's right. Any discussion on that amendment to the original motion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay. Now, it's been amended. We now have 2 meetings scheduled for January, February, and March, as has been customary. As I said before, I mean, if you really saw that there was not a pressing need to meet, I suppose this board can always make the decision whether or not to cancel a meeting. Having said that, then, is there any further discussion before we vote on the motion as it's now been amended?
Yes, I would, I'm just kind of wondering, we have a variety of different boards as well as some, in general, just some committees, other organizations. I just wrote down the acronyms, so that probably was not a good thing for me to do. But I believe all of them at least are fall under the name tag of either a board or a committee. And yet we only have 2 on there in addition to our meetings. So we have the Construction Board of Appeals, the Board of Review, the EDC, another, election committee, disaster assessment team, I think is what I meant to write, but I wrote DET for some reason. And then the Utilities, Service and Finance committees. Is there a reason why we're identifying that we're going to have particular meetings available for the public to see ahead of time and not others?
If I may, and again, you can clean up on that, Dan, if you wish. I was going to say, for example, I'm on EDC. We meet on an as-needed basis. I bet we met once in the last 2 years. You know, it might be an election year where there aren't any elections that are scheduled for that year, and therefore they might meet once, possibly, whereas in an election year where they have multiple, they might meet several times. Dan, you look like you want to say something.
The committees, we're going to have to organize an initial meeting with each one. We have one scheduled for several, but we want to organize an initial meeting, and then each committee will set their meeting dates. So that'll be the action item on each of their agenda to set. Today, you're just approving the top one, and the other ones it's just there for our similar notice that we put out. So.
Okay, so just to be clear, when you say committees, I'm assuming that's Utilities, Service, and Finance. Is that also then the EDC?
The EDC is one that he mentioned. It only meets as needed.
Okay.
So that's how there's nothing scheduled. It hasn't met for a little while.
And what about the election committee?
I was on elections, and we meet as needed. Essentially, we have to approve election workers prior to elections, but we don't have to schedule that.
And then the disaster assessment team, which is that an as needed, or is that?
Yes, it's as needed.
And the Board of Review, that I believe is March?
Yes, that's the citizen board, yes. It meets certain days based on the law.
And then the Construction Board of Appeals?
That just meets when we have an appeal.
So I guess I would ask just for clarification for and ZBA is on there. So I guess I would ask for clarification that we essentially even just separate that out so that, I mean, if I have the question, I'm going to assume that other people might have the question in the community. So even if we have it spelled out that the CBA, the EDC, the election committee, and the disaster assessment team will be meeting as needed, and the Board of Review will meet as required by statute, usually the third Tuesday of March, and then the Utilities, Service, and Finance will be scheduling their meetings. Just so it's clear what the expectation is if people are going and finding this information online just to make it available. That would be, I guess I'm going to move to amend just to include those brief explanations of why those other committees or meetings are not being assigned.
And I think add to that the fact that that same explanation then might say, be sure to check the township website or whatever from time to time so as you can see when those are scheduled.
And you can sign up for alerts, and they will email it right to you for anyone that you want to sign up for.
I would support Catherine's motion to amend.
Okay. Okay. Is supported? Any discussion on the amendments?
This would be, well, I have a different point of discussion. It has nothing to do with the date, so, but you're just asking for a comment on that amendment, so I'm going to.
Okay. All right. Any comments on the amendment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Very good. So the original motion has been further amended now, and is still before the board. Any other discussion or further amendment? Otherwise, we'll take a vote.
My only question or, dare I say, friendly amendment would be, I think we need to clarify that the boards and committees that would be deemed as having to abide by the OMA, the Open Meetings Act, that we require or explain that those will be open to the public, that so going forward we don't end up in any situations where we have any potential issues. Whether it might seem silly, that's one little meeting of a whatever, planning commission or something like that, but some really important things happen in those committees, as well as it's not just, the board where all the magic happens, so to speak.
Right, and I know when they're published, that mention is made of them being open to the public, but I think your encouragement is to, maybe on the motion that you've already had passed of amendment, is make it even clearer that these are meetings that are open meetings, that they should follow the township website, because some of these committees, the following committees only meet on an ad hoc basis or what have you, and maybe it's just further clarification to say, make it as clear to the public as possible. They have an opportunity to know and participate.
Well, and I guess specifically that people would be able to come in person to participate, that they wouldn't be excluded because it's going to be done on a YouTube or a Zoom or a this or that, whatever.
Sure. Rob, you can make that just clear on what we've already voted on. Yeah, I know the notices themselves, though, also require that notification. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the motion as now twice amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, it is passed. Item number 12, appointment now to some of these very committees, boards, and commissions we were just discussing. I'm going to place a motion before the board to approve what I've recommended in the way of appointments.
Support.
Support.
All right, moved and supported, and now it's on the table. I would only say preliminarily that I tried to make recommendations that would give people a variety of experiences. In a couple of cases, I knew of the prior board members who had been on the committee, maybe wanted something new or different than what they'd done before, and so I made recommendations that way. I tried to think of people like Gary and his expertise and where I placed him, but you know what? These are all open to board discussion and debate, and my feelings aren't hurt if people disagree. So,
I guess my question, does everybody still have a copy of the list submitted by, I guess that now there's three lists. There's Jim's list, Ryan's list, and Dan's list.
Ryan's list and Dan's list, what is that?
I don't think it ever got sent. It was submitted prior to the previous meeting, and it never got sent. I put together my own list.
So that's apparently something you wanted to talk about tonight?
Correct. Yeah.
All right. The one that's been sent to everyone as part of the agenda is the one that I've moved and placed before you, and that's the one that's being called up right there. And I think, I don't know about there being three of them, but there's that one, and then there's the ability to discuss that one and, I guess make your own recommendations.
I think his third one is the original yellow. And then the green is this.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what Michael meant or not.
Because I looked at it and there was even different ones on that. So I just printed all three out and I just labeled them as.
Well, the unmeeting, we're not looking at that one. We're looking at this one. And take it away. If anybody wishes to address, say, well, I can't imagine doing this particular thing. This is not my area, or I'd really rather do something different, or any thoughts?
Yeah. I was going to say, I looked at the list that Ryan had put together, and I was, it really seemed to utilize the strengths. I know, Jim, your original list did not have Gary on Planning Commission, and I think Mr. Veldink's expertise in building development utilities is the absolute best case scenario for an appointment to that.
Okay. That's why it reflects that.
That one's modified on Dan's list, and that sounds good.
That's my list. That's not Dan's list. It's my list.
Well, that's the hybrid.
I asked Dan to make that change. Yeah.
Catherine, it's if we scroll up, it's highlighted in green, but Gary under Planning Commission on the first page
Instead of
Right there it is. Yep. Those
So
are
the planning commission is Gary still on there.
Yeah, I asked Dan to flip those probably even before last week's meeting. I don't recall, or maybe it was
The original yellow was what we saw before. That's why when you made some changes after the meeting, that was postponed. I highlighted those so people could tell which changes you made.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
In case they looked at the list and didn't see there were changes.
Yep.
And I also have a list that Ryan proposed.
And he affirms that, right? Those two.
I submitted it just before
the last meeting,
but never got it.
Got it. All right. Well, it's on the floor, so.
If we're going to talk about Ryan's list, can we see Ryan's list, or can we go board by board and talk about it digitally?
I have another worksheet here if you want to show you.
It's just hard to talk about Ryan's list when I haven't seen Ryan's list.
I know.
I didn't know Ryan's list
I'm
existed.
sorry, I just assumed that everybody had it from, you emailed it to somebody?
I haven't seen it.
Didn't get emailed to any board members.
If you want, Dan.
Don't know what you're talking
Do you want him
about.
to pass on to all of us everything you send them? Because don't set a precedent.
Go ahead, bring it up the list.
Nope.
No, that's not the right list.
It said by Ryan at the top.
Do you have are those hard copies?
I have hard copies right here if you'd like one.
Okay.
I have one.
No changes from the previous one.
Read all the words.
I was going to say, I just picked this up from here last week, so.
All right, down to John.
And Beck will
Check to make sure.
A lot of my list is trying to keep the continuity as well. I know with Michael had previous experience on the Zoning Board of Appeals, so I was going to keep him in that spot. And I know future things that are going to be coming up in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals that I may have not necessarily involvement with, but a neighbor of them. I figured remove it, but keep Michael where he is at. And I also wanted to discuss as far as like the Construction Board of Appeals.
Bring it up. Bring it up.
Have they ever had a board member present for that? And if
it hasn't been customary, I'm not saying it's forbidden, but
I would.
Dan, fine.
Sorry, we probably have the list here. Now you've got
A blue to show the changes. Okay? Ryan's proposed changes. So then you can kind of just decide on each one if you scroll down. Okay, you can see, so the blue is the one that's different. Go ahead, Rod, these are all the same. And you can see the blue that went for election is the proposed change. Going a little too fast for him. There you go. And see, here's the committees. Complete change. You can just see the difference between.
some of them just got mixed up, like Schwam is still in those.
Yeah.
Brian, did you discuss these with Jim at all?
No, but the previous list was neither discussed with anybody else on the board either.
That's not true, but it may not have been discussed as much with you as you might have wished.
Okay.
I wasn't discussed, I was just asked.
That's fine. That's fine. You know what? I could have communicated more with more people. It was not intentional, but to your point, if you're saying, you know, we could have hashed this out, yeah, I think we each could have hashed it out more carefully, but here it is. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, and that was a surprise to me is in 2016 when I was new to the board, I was contacted, give me a list of
by me,
boards you'd be interested in, which I thought was great.
With me, sure.
I'll rank them as what you'd like to be on most down to least. So it was kind of a shocker this year when that didn't happen. And also it was brought up in, I believe, a finance meeting, might even been a previous board meeting where it was discussed that boards would remain the same for 6 months and then would be addressed. But then once I got
I don't recall
a different list, it was kind of, what's going on here? So,
but I'd reserve the word shocked for something actually shocking. So, anyway, you don't like where I put you, and you'd like things different. So make your case, I guess, to us. I see just a handful of changes. I don't know if it's highlighted there, but I see, oh yeah, it is. Okay. All right.
I was excited about the change from utilities to services because I've been on utilities for the last 4 years. I think there's something to be said for continuity, but I also think that there's something to be said for stretching your wings a little bit and variety. I think in a lot of ways, changing committees as new boards are seated, are good for the community. I'm thinking, for example, the sidewalk waiver request came before utilities previously when I was on that, and now we have a new board seated, and they're coming back for it, hoping for a different result. And I think that specific example isn't an isolated one of things that have come before the Utilities Committee previously, and people are maybe hoping a new board would maybe have some new voices and consider it differently. So to that end, I was looking forward to a change to services. But that said, I'm happy to be a team player and am happy to serve in either of those capacities. I really love serving with the Jenison Historical Society, so I'm happy that didn't change colors and names up there, which is silly, but I have really grown fond of that group. But that would just be my only food for thought, is I think that every argument you can be made for consistency, like keeping John and I on utilities, there is a similar argument for different voices being heard on the same topic. So,
I should ask this question, and that is, the four of you obviously knew about this list, and I think, I assume, agree with it. If you're not persuadable, then we're wasting time. That is, if you're going to vote, where you're going to vote, tell us so we can, move on to the next item.
I think for us to get this at the last minute, and for Jim to be overwhelmingly selected, and not to have worked with him, and to have
here at the last meeting, though.
This thrown at us.
Here at the last
I didn't have it.
It was sent digitally prior to the meeting, the previous meeting.
But you'd not talked with him about this, and you're going to turn everything upside down.
But none of this was talked to any of us about either. So I'm not.
It is available. It's an open door policy.
I'm just saying it's a two-way street.
So does Dan.
I think that the difference is that Jim's list was in the packet for our meeting a week ago, and so we all had it at least a week prior, or at least the Friday before. To have not known that this list existed saddens me, because I feel like if it was out there and it hadn't gotten distributed, then it wouldn't have been difficult in the interest of fair play to send a PDF of it to Jim, John, and I and say, hey, I know you weren't in the boardroom and this is sitting at your seat on the table, and so I want to make sure electronically you've gotten it. I'm surprised at the tactics of it. I don't care, frankly, what committee I land on. I care way more about when whatever committee I land on meets than I care what the topic is. But it just saddens and disappoints me that out of the gate, that is going to be our strategy for communicating with each other.
It is very sad, because I also was not alerted that there were essentially the green things, that there were things that were changed from the original recommendations that Jim made to a whole new, I didn't reread literally every single word of a 93-page packet, because that's insane. So had I been told, hey, here's a list that I'm changing things that prior to that, I mean, I think it's all, and I don't, to me, I don't know what happened. What I'm hearing is, and I don't think there's a dispute to it, that you sent this, I saw this list, it was printed, it was here, but you guys weren't here. But then my understanding is you had emailed it to Dan so it could be distributed prior to that. So I don't want to.
Why wasn't it included then in the packet for this meeting? Like this one, the one with
That's
the
an
green
excellent
highlights
question.
on
Is
it.
the ball was in
I don't know why
Dan's
it was
court
in-
at the last meeting and it did not get forwarded?
Listen, I think that,
Is it a chain of custody issue?
I think we're here, it's here in front of us, let's hash it out. I've seen the changes you're recommending. Becky, you've spoken your view of where you're placed. I know you like the Historical Society. You'd have preferred to switch over to services. I know in John's case, I denied him like 4 years ago when he wanted to be on finance, and that was one of the reasons I thought as a longstanding board member, I thought, okay, he's waited. But again, it's subject to your vote. I don't know why I wouldn't be the alternate on the two utilities and service. That's just sort of been, that the supervisor would serve in an alternate role on those. I'm happy to do so.
I would gladly give you that
Yeah.
for utilities. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Catherine Henry was not on either one of these three, so I did put her as an alternate on that one.
She's not on what now? Oh, you
Not
don't
on-
have her on,
She's
Catherine,
not
you're not
all of
on
them.
any of the committees?
I'm okay being an alternate, but I guess I'd like to at least stay an alternate. And
Is there a
not be-
reason you're not on one of the three committees under this proposal?
I'm just kind of taking in the whole list here, and hearing, just bits and pieces of different people's backgrounds as I've had, limited knowledge. I probably know the same amount about each of you at this point because I don't really know anybody. But to me, I'd be happy with, I'm still, because it's not a fault of you guys over there, but I'm not sure I necessarily caught all the green changes that you made, but based on the one I had of the yellow, the one that's printed in yellow in front of us, I'm fine with that. And like I said, I just can't see everything else that's on there, but I didn't see some huge changes otherwise. I don't know if this would make any difference. Perhaps, you kind of mentioned just basically an all or nothing thing, but there's, some hashing out of all kinds of details. I'm seeing, for example, Planning Commission, you guys agree. If we could at least start going down, I think there's a ton where everybody's on the same page. If we could even just grab those, I would just...
They should have been on the same page before, and Ryan should have met with Jim and have the treasurer hand a list over.
I think you made that point several times.
Compromise this out before we got here.
It's not all on Ryan.
Should not get this at the last minute.
No, and that's not on Ryan either.
That's not transparency, and that's not
That's not on Ryan.
We do not have 4 votes.
Yeah. Well, lesson
So
learned.
if we can just right now go ahead and say there,
Yeah.
you want it? Because that's what you're doing.
No, you're making this an
Not talk to
us
Jim
versus
ahead of
them.
time is
And-
so insulting, I can't believe it.
It's insulting that you think the rules apply to certain people and not others. So literally every single point of concern that you guys have raised about how this information was distributed ahead of time, or the conversations that were not had ahead of time, literally could be said of the original list. The list was put out there without any conversation with any of us about it. And maybe there was conversation with you, but there wasn't with any of us.
Okay.
So we can go down the negative road. I was trying to go
Jim
forward
had
together.
COVID last week.
I was trying to go forward together, and it looks like we have a lot of points of agreement. So if you guys just want to say, fine, we'll just go with the yellow Ryan's list, fine, let's do it. I was trying to figure out if we could just figure out where we have points of disagreement, and it looks like we have a lot of agreement, though. So could we not? I mean, if you just want to vote on the whole list, fine, let's just vote on the whole list. But
I don't think anybody, failed to notice that on that first page, Catherine, that there's really very little to discuss. The only change really there was Michael Bosch in for Ryan. Ryan apparently doesn't want to do it, and Michael does, so it's hard to argue with that. They more or less made a trade with each other. Would everyone agree with that? That doesn't affect anybody but the two of them.
The only other discussion on that would be the addition of possibly Gary on custody.
Right, on the CBA. And I think your question that you asked a moment ago is, hey, we haven't had a board representative necessarily in the past. Dan, I mean, we're putting a lot on Gary. Hey, let's put Gary here, put Gary there. He's like...
Yeah, I'm just curious how he become the commissioner of noxious weeds. That's just the only question I have. Because it just
I
seems
think
like...
you should ride along with Rich.
I'm just trying to figure out what that's all about. That's all, Mike. And you get the name commissioner.
And you get to wear a special hat.
Do you really?
But, Dan...
Hey, are you okay with us getting this right now? Is this okay with you?
I'm here to serve.
let's complete that first page. Dan, the question on the floor is whether or not Gary being added to that and being a board representative, I mean, there's nothing to forbid that, even though we haven't necessarily required a board.
Is make it a 3-year term to fit the new 3-year term part that we have to change. So I don't have a problem. Instead of board representative, just appoint him for a 3-year term.
Yeah, okay. So identify there 12/31,
2023.
Yeah, 2023.
That's my only question there. That's why I didn't put the term in there, but that's what it should be.
Yeah, and John, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was just trying to get to that first page and then visit the more.
I feel bad that they did not work with the supervisor and they came in with this list. And you are a man of compromise, and you would have worked this out, and it would have gone smooth.
I appreciate
If you agreed with it,
John,
we would have said nothing.
I appreciate you saying that. I will be the first to admit, and it was not by design, I didn't communicate as much or as well as I did 4 years ago. And I could have communicated better with that. Now, having said that, Becky makes the point that my list was out there, and that would have been an opportune time to say, hey, before that meeting that turned into an unmeeting, can we talk about this? But so I think you could say there's failures on both parts.
You
so I appreciate
6 weeks early. There was plenty of time to talk with you.
Yeah, that might be a little.
I disagree with 6 weeks.
That's okay.
Unless you guys got it and you didn't go to new board members.
Not the case. Not the case.
It was early.
I just wish, Ryan, I don't know exactly what the process is behind the scenes that is putting packets together and putting it out. But Ryan, I wish that at the start of our agenda, it says notice is hereby given, that we're going to have this special meeting on November 30, and it's signed by Ryan Kidd, clerk. I wish that when this packet came out for tonight's meeting, that if this list existed, it had been included in the packet.
May I, Ryan? May I just real quickly? I'm going to Ryan's defense a little bit here, Becky.
Okay, I don't know the process.
Ryan, you're going to say that you felt like in providing it to Dan that you had done the proper method of providing it to us. But not having seen it or confirmed that, I guess you would say, well, you know what, next time I'm going to make sure to confirm or be clear in communication to him, but it wasn't presumably by design that you intended to bring something.
No, Mr. Chair,
he submitted to me before the last meeting.
Yep. Okay.
We had some changes. The issue is we had a discussion on Wednesday, and I was under the impression he was going to have a discussion with you.
Okay.
When I spoke with the clerk, he said you were going to speak to you and you were going to work something out.
Okay.
So that's why I didn't share it, because I thought it was going to be yet another
Sure.
alternative. So
that makes
Ryan,
sense.
I hope that I didn't come across as disrespectful, but what the end of my thought was going to just be is that moving forward, if there's something like that there is a list circulating, I would appreciate that we, as somebody who is rarely in the township offices except for meetings, I would just appreciate if we double check that all necessary documentation gets into the packet in advance. Because when Michael said the Ryan list and the Jim list, I had no idea that there was another list besides the one that was provided in the packet for this meeting. So.
And I think there's an important point to be, taken out of that. The whole board needs to be given whatever information is out there, but also the public. And, obviously if a packet is put together and those of us on the board are getting it, that's in theory, it should be the same packet that's online that the whole, the public can see. And so, with that, I think we can all agree that we would want everybody to be able to see it.
It's not so much for me, it's for everyone who views the packet.
So, Mr. Chairman, the question I have is, are there people that aren't happy with the committee they got, or the committees they want to move to? Because I haven't heard anybody say, keep talking about lists.
I wish
There's somebody that if you're at the committee you want to be on, put your name up.
I wish that I was on services instead of utilities, but I'm happy to serve in either capacity. It's surprising to me that Catherine is on none of those three because I think you bring a lot of expertise and a different perspective, and I think historically all board members have been on at least one of utility, services, or finance. And so it's surprising to me that you're not on one of those.
That's what we're voting on.
I want you to have the full board experience over the next 4 years, and I think that there is a lot of value to serving on one of those regularly meeting, heavier agenda item kind of committees. I'm on Historical Society and WCET and elections. I'm happy to serve in all three of those capacities, but that in addition to utilities or services feels like a lot more than what I've done before. I'm definitely up to the challenge. But WCET is not something I have served on previously. And so if someone else, wanted another way to have their voice heard, I would happily share that one. I don't know what the WCET list was on Jim, but I was surprised that I was on WCET and Denison Historical. Please don't take Denison Historical away from me.
I didn't appoint you to those. You're saying you don't like the change. All right. So there's two things she said. We're going to have to dig into the meat of it. We're on page 2 now. That's where it seems to break down. In fact, you would prefer not to be on WCET. Is there anyone here who says, you know what, I'd really like to be on that? Yeah, sure.
The question we're asking, there's a motion that we have floor is for this one. We want to make sure, for our part, that you all are discussing the list that's on the floor.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So she's talking about not wanting to be on one, but that's not one that's...
Very good.
So I just want to clarify if they're doing something different.
Right. I would make a motion to take from the table the list that is currently on the screen, essentially.
The packet.
For clarification purposes. And then if it needs to be separated, I can. Otherwise, it would be a joint motion then to start addressing the list that we've been referring to as Ryan's list. I don't know how else to identify that.
Technically, it's not on the table. This is on the table. That list was passed out, but it's not in the form of motion. So technically, we're dealing with this list right here.
Well, this list is all of them together.
That's what we got to deal with right now.
For clarification, the motion though, when she's talking about being on a list or not or whatever, our conversation has been geared around, we're actually discussing Ryan's list. So for a point of discussion, to make it clear.
Correct.
That was my mistake.
Correct.
No, I don't,
I mixed up my two packets. We're talking about Ryan's list, but yeah.
All right, I would support Catherine's motion to remove this current list from the table and replace it with, is that correct? You want to replace it with?
At least for, I think it's going to help the way the conversation's been going. That would be my motion. Yeah.
Okay, I would support that.
So you want to vote to remove Jim's list?
It's considered a motion to take from the table the list that was presently presented by motion.
List.
And then,
and replace it with a treasurer's list.
And to consider it with
so remove the supervisor's list and replace it with a treasurer's list.
With the clerk's
list.
For purposes of consideration, yeah.
Okay. Either way, we're going to wind up having a discussion about how we finalize things. Is there any further discussion on that particular motion right there? If there's none, I'm going to ask Ryan if he would call roll on that one.
Okay. Would you read the motion first, please?
So the motion is to remove the supervisor's list and replace it with the clerk's list.
From the table.
From the table. Supervisor.
It's been moved. In fact, I say no.
Clerk is yes. Treasurer.
Yes.
John Schwam.
No.
Gary Veldink.
No.
Becky Steele.
No.
Yes.
Evan Henry. So it's
Okay.
4 no's.
Okay, so that motion fails. The motion is still before you then with, as it's the so-called supervisor's list. We're back to, as I say, working through now looking at that list. I believe on the first page, we have agreement in that we've added one person. Well, I know we haven't by motion yet, but it's part of the discussion that could come about in the way of a motion. Suggestion is made that we add Gary to the CBA, and further that Ryan come off from ZBA and Michael be placed on ZBA. That's what we have so far. Mm-hmm. When we turn to the second page then, obviously we know there are differences between what I have proposed and what others are thinking. Comments about that, I know comments that are on the floor include the following. Catherine is not on any one of these three committees, and no slight to Catherine, but she does like to ask questions, and these committees are great places to learn a bunch so that we're not necessarily learning it in here with you. but it's fine to do it that way too. But I think sometimes you get into the nitty-gritty of some of these, it's very interesting. It's very eye-opening and helpful. So that's an issue that's before us. Becky has said that she'd prefer to be on services and remain there. It's been suggested that maybe she'd be removed and moved elsewhere. So I'm not going to make the arguments for those who wish to change it, but we can see what those changes are. I can only say for myself, I would like to be the alternate on utilities and service. I have been the last 4 years. I bet it comes up once a year. It just kind of gives me a pulse as supervisor on some of these, and it's a good opportunity to join with some of these committees. Seldom it comes up. So.
Just to kind of address something there, I'm going to always ask questions because sometimes I really don't know the answer, but sometimes I think it's important that we really bring some information to the forefront. I think a lot of the times, if I've even heard somebody else, for example, if I'm talking about an agenda item with my husband before a meeting and he brings up a question, if I think, gosh, that sounds like a question I think a lot of people would probably have, I'm going to make it a point to ask the question so that everybody else can get that answered. That's just the way I've always done it. I'm a trained mediator as well, and so I like to fall on the sword, if you will, to that degree where it's I'll be the one that wants to ask all the questions. So
you and I have the same pension, Catherine. So you ask away. I don't mean to diminish your enthusiasm. So thank you. Anything substantive about the list that's before you? Yes.
Zoning Board of Appeals, you said you're going to put my name up. You're going to take off Brian's. I don't see a Brian on it.
No, Gary, you're on Planning Commission on the list that's before you up there on the screen, the one that was published with this agenda. So it's Ryan right now that's on the ZBA.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yep. And the suggestion has been made to have Michael remain on the ZBA, and they seem amenable to it between them. So.
Okay.
Yep. And then not mentioned there, but has been brought up tonight, is the idea that you might be added to the Construction Board of Appeals. How do you feel about that, Gary? You good with that?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay, it doesn't come up real often, as Dan was saying. It's only as often as there's an appeal.
Committees don't really meet that often. I know that.
Not that one, yeah.
You have to also change the terms to 3 years.
Yeah, that's right. To 12/31 of 2023. Right? Is that right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So, thank you. Page 2 then. My motion's before you, so I don't really need to say more, but those of you who don't like that, if you wish to speak, or those who do.
The one in particular I would like to fight for would be me moving to and switching spots with John Schwam on the Finance Committee. I believe having the supervisor, clerk, and treasurer is extremely important on the Finance Committee, considering we're the ones that sign the checks.
Okay. John or anyone else impacted by that wish to speak?
I've served on the Finance Committee before, and about 6 years ago. And I feel I've got a strong background. I feel I have a strong finance background. And I think I can add a lot. But I can understand that. I think that's legitimate. Mm-hmm. And that would be your call, what you folks want to do.
Yeah. I think that is where it comes down to muscle in terms of votes. John, I want you on there. And that's no slight to Ryan, because Ryan did a great job as well. So I just felt like, I didn't realize you served on it in the past. I just thought, I told 4 years ago, okay, he's waited and
actually, Rich didn't serve, and he was our clerk.
Yeah.
And I served instead.
Yeah.
But
okay.
that was Dale's call.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we may have to piecemeal this a little bit if we're not horse trading. So, I can count noses as well as the rest of you. Anyone else wish to speak on that particular point as to whether or not you agree or disagree?
I agree with Ryan. We were just signing checks last Monday.
Okay.
I think that it might as well head it off at the pass before it gets to the point that we're questioning it as we're signing.
I agree with that too, because instinctively on some of the financial items, I reached out to the people that I know that sign the checks, albeit new for Ryan and you're in a different role as treasurer, but to me it would make sense to have them be along with you and being on the. Are you on the committee right now, Jim? I guess I did.
Yeah.
Okay. So I didn't necessarily have that in mind about who's on which committee, but I just think, as I think a lot of the public would think of too, if there's a question, a particular question that comes up on, say a financial issue, the people that are the ones signing the checks really need to be the most in the know. So is that the two of you then? Am I right in that? Okay. So I would agree that, I see no reason why the supervisor wouldn't be on there. And if it had more people, I don't think it wouldn't be an issue of having you on there, but just having the two of them that sign the checks, I think would be important to have that information and be.
I was going to say, since you've been on before, if you and John switched and you became an alternate on finance, but then I remembered the issue when I originally looked at it was because it meets at 8:15 in the morning. That would be a conflict of an issue. That could be moved too. I mean, that's not a hard and stone thing. But I don't think John's looking to bump me off from finance committee. If I can speak for John. Sure. I don't think he's bumping it. Well, and I will say this: having been on different committees, I mean, we're acting like finance is the pinnacle or something. It's really not. I think when I was on utilities, I spent a whole lot more money on there putting a $5 million sewer line in the ground, but be that as it may. Anyone else wish to opine about that particular point, since that seems to be a pretty significant change? We've heard from virtually everybody. I guess, Gary, do you have an opinion? You don't have to express it now. You could wait to vote, but I want to at least give you the opportunity. No? All right. Okay. Other comments? Other comments? I have the feeling, I don't want to necessarily piece it into 5 different amendments. I'm trying to maybe cover any remaining ones and then see if we string it together in 1 or 2 amendments.
Which items are you talking about? I don't want to talk out of order on
Page 2, basically page 2.
Anything on page 2?
Yep.
Is it possible to scroll up? I wasn't sure if I caught any.
Sure, we can start right there at the top.
So the only difference between the 2 lists that I saw, the 2 proposals anyway, between the 2 of you was, as far as I'm seeing, before we get down to the actual board committees, is just John on the elections committee versus I think you originally had Gary and then put John, and then Ryan, you had put me on there, and I thought.
Looking at this one though.
Right, but I was just thinking you and I did have.
We texted each other. Yep.
Wasn't that about the election committee?
It is about the election committee. Are you strongly interested in that, or is that what you're trying to say?
I guess, I guess I'd be interested in serving on that one. That's why I was surprised to see that there was a change, but it wasn't to me.
Very good. So you're surprised, but you want to be on there. That's your, okay. All right. Thoughts about that, anybody?
I think we have to be careful that our conversation is to ask John from Election Commission and to ask John from Finance. And John, we value your voice.
Thank you.
I think that if we're going to move forward with those changes, then we need to talk about where we can utilize John. The same way that I advocated for making sure that Catherine was on committees when I was accidentally looking at the Ryan one instead of the one at my computer screen.
Could we vote on finance?
If you'd like to piecemeal it, there'd have to be a motion on the floor to say, I want to move to amend on that point and then take a vote on that.
Well, to vote on it as a whole will reduce my options.
Okay. All right. You'd like to see where that falls and then.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense. So there's a motion by John on the, you're not making the motion. If someone wishes to make the motion and wants to change the present status of things.
I wish to put the motion forward to change me on the finance committee and move John Schwalm to the alternate.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. And I think this is one, since we've talked about sufficiently, I think it's one to just go by roll call.
Okay. Supervisor?
Again, on your motion, no. I had to think that.
Clerk is a yes. Treasurer?
Yes.
John Schwalm?
No.
Gary Belding?
Yes.
Becky Steele?
No.
Catherine Henry.
Yes.
Okay, the ayes have it 4-3. So that change is made to the Finance Committee. Ryan will be serving there, and then John as an alternate. I don't think anybody would object, John, if you said, I don't want to be an alternate, by the way. He does may.
Well, that's fine.
The other two committees, are there any motions with respect to those? You've got a motion on the floor already as to the main committees, utilities and services.
Jim, does that leave me with services and elections? Is there a possibility of utilities again?
Oh, certainly make your case that, you know what, you would like to.
I would, if I heard you correctly, I would be fine with, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to sort my way through all the lists with what's going on, but if I heard you correctly, and you want to be on utilities, I'm currently listed on there. I'm fine with you taking my place on utilities. I would have more of an interest in being on the election committee.
I'd be happy to go that way.
So I'll make a motion that to revise the list that is currently on the screen to include Catherine Henry on the elections committee with Ryan Kidd and myself, to have utilities be Michael Bosch as listed, John Schwalm in Catherine Henry's place, and Gary Veldink as listed. Services to be as listed on the screen, and finance we just voted on.
Before, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, Catherine was on your list?
I don't know why Catherine wouldn't swap with John.
Well, Catherine can have my spot. I mean,
Can we leave services off from that? I guess just because we haven't talked about it yet. Everything else until then, I think, sounds like we're all in the same.
The election commission meets probably not at all next year, and maybe once or twice the following. So.
And if it matters, our election commission meetings have been under 10 minutes. Essentially, we have a list of poll workers in advance, and we ask any questions that we have about poll workers and accept those lists. Sometimes we've purchased equipment for the elections, but it is not.
Just to make sure I understood everything that you just said before that, though, you were talking about the elections committee and utilities if we were to leave off service, right?
Okay.
It would be just those two?
I'm fine with my motion being elections to include Catherine, utilities to include John, leaving services out of my motion.
Are you including page 1 that we've decided?
She didn't mention it. We can do that
And
separately.
page 1 as decided, including the Ryan and Michael switch for ZBA.
Okay. And there was also adding Gary to Construction Board of Appeals to be precise. So, is there a second for that motion?
Second.
There's a second. Okay. Comments about the motion that's before you? My comment would be that that's not really a switch, apples for apples with Catherine. Utilities meets regularly and does some of the heavy lifting. Elections meets almost not at all and is very short. I think that at least if we're going to approve this motion, we should have in mind either potentially reappoint Catherine to utilities or place her on services. But that's just that doesn't necessarily affect this motion then.
I have no problem if Catherine takes my spot on utilities.
Well, she's right there
If she's interested.
No, I think it's, sorry, we got a lot of things that are all going on. I mentally was settled with whatever she ended up having her final motion on, so I guess to me, I'd prefer just to stay with whatever the final motion ended up being, for what it's worth, as far as it relates to me.
All right. Been moved and seconded. There's no further discussion. I'm going to go roll call again.
Just have her read her motion back one more time before we vote on it.
I'll start on the first page. My motion is to include Gary Veldink on the Planning Commission. Is a green change on page 1. To swap Ryan Kidd from Michael Bosch on the ZBA. To appoint Gary Veldink to the Construction Board of Appeals. To have the Elections Committee be Ryan Kidd Chairman, Catherine Henry, and Becky Steele Trustees. And to have the Utilities Committee be Michael Bosch John Schwam, Gary Veldink, and Jim Wieringa as the alternate.
Supervisor?
Yes.
Clerk is a yes. Treasurer?
Yes.
John Schwam?
Yes.
Gary Veldink?
Yes.
Becky Steele?
Yes.
Catherine Henry?
Yes.
Okay. Making some progress here. I'd like to make a motion. I know that. Yeah, I'm looking to amend my own motion here. I'd like to move to eliminate Michael Bosch from utilities and put Catherine on utilities. We've placed Michael now in ZBA. He's on finance. And those are regular meters. If you give him a third one, that's a lot.
Did you say replace?
Keep you on.
To put you on utilities and to put Michael, and take Michael off.
Is that not what we just voted on?
No, you were removed in place of John.
And
Okay,
so
and
now
you didn't want to separate it.
He wants to keep you on, so now we've got to put you in Michael's spot instead.
It's been moved. Is there support?
Support.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't think that far ahead in my
That's
first.
all right. Discussion.
I think it'd be respectful if I said no, that I was okay with. I really liked the people that were discussed being put on there, and I was okay not being on that. It's almost like I'm being forced to just go wherever because, like I'm not going to do enough, but I guarantee you I will be doing plenty. So I think that's, at this point, it's kind of approaching the point of disrespect to me.
Sure. No, I don't mean disrespect. I'm looking at Michael, and for his sake, thinking he's got 3 plus the board. He's got 4 regular meetings, 5 if you count 2 board meetings.
Do you homeschool?
No.
Okay.
I don't think, you know what, and I can say I have 8 kids, right? So we can all say, but listen.
So I'm a homeschool teacher, that was my point. I'm allowed to have a
Okay,
a point on
and
that.
utilities meets after board meetings in the evening, and so it would not interfere in any way with that. That's partly why I was thinking that one instead of the other one for you. Does it not, Dan? You meet in the evenings for utilities? Monday evenings? I know it could vary, but that's generally what has been.
We have for the last 2 boards that has
Yes,
been the case.
the first meeting of the board will be to set the schedule. So if they want to continue that way, which they have for the last 8 years, yes. But, I mean, it's whatever works out for the members that you choose.
I guess my understanding is, unless I misunderstood you, Mr. Bosch, that you were okay staying on, and I was okay not being on. So I think this is kind of a colossal waste of time to rehash that particular issue.
I don't think he said that. I think he said he would like to trade with me.
I'm open to anything, whatever sounds good to you guys. So.
We've never had it where we've never had a board member not serve on a committee, ever. Not saying that it's a rule that you have to, we've just not had somebody who hasn't.
I think there's value, Catherine, to having your voice on utility services or finance. And so I feel like this swap with Michael on utilities, or we need to discuss the services committee being as listed, myself, John Schwam, and Ryan. I think that we should look for an opening for you on one of those 2. Because I think that it is important for all board members to serve on at least one of those 3, but I'm also not going to force you into something that you're not interested in. I respect you too much for that.
I just hear a lot of people that have a strong, like for example, I didn't know that you would want to be, hold on, let me make sure I'm looking at the right.
Genesis Historical?
So, well, yeah, but I mean, you had mentioned also, serving on service, if I remember that correctly, that you would want to, and, some other comments that have been made. So to me, I think as each person expressed interest on being or not being on certain things, I kind of took that in at the time, and that seemed to make sense, where things are sitting. So, whether I end up being on a particular set of 3 committees or not, to me, I think is I understand there's maybe a way things have always been done. I really couldn't care less. I mean, I don't mean disrespect in the way that, I'm going to purposely not do it that way, but not having known that before I looked at any list at all, it doesn't change my mind in the sense that I think it needs to be the right people on there. So, to me, I don't have, I guess the way that I look at it, I'm going to be the one, because we'll eventually have all of these topics make it in front of us. I'm not going to be ignoring any of the topics. I may very well end up being at quite a few. And to be honest, I think what I would like to do is to be, to go to some of these meetings myself and to be able to open my schedule up, especially if somebody is new on the board, to 1 week or 1 month or whatever, I'm going to focus on utilities because there's some stuff coming up I really want to hear about, but then that's pushing the rest of my schedule because this isn't like a full-time job. I need to be able to have those other, times open, whereas the next month or next week, gosh, there's something on the services committee that I think I really need to learn about or hear about. I'm not the one that's going to be debating the issues or whatever, but I want to be able to learn that way. And so the more I heard, people have, want to be on certain things or not, I think it works just fine for me to not be on there. I would like to be the alternate on services. Of any of them, I think that could be a good place where I could serve in that capacity. But I think, we could essentially, if somebody decided they no longer wanted to serve, if Michael Bosch's schedule determined later on, next year or 2 years or whatever, that it wasn't going to work, that would be, it's not like I can never serve, but I would really value being able to learn a little bit, of each of these and participate in that way. So
I think the piece that we've run into with that previously, like attending when you're not on the committee, is that if you attend, you're welcome to attend one that you're not on and listen, but you can't participate in the conversation because then there's a quorum of board members.
That's not actually how the law works, but okay. I'm not going to, I understand that's what's been said.
I would just want us to be mindful of, I want to be mindful of and respectful of you, and so if you wanted your voice heard in one of those situations, I would want to make sure that this group is giving you the opportunity to have your voice formally heard in those settings. I'm not trying to push you. I don't want us to get a year from now and have you have regrets because there are voices that have lots of opportunities to be formally heard, and those aren't yours in our big three committees. That would just make me sad for you.
Well, and again, to me, I think because we're not cemented, it's not like for 4 years I could never serve on any of these things. I really would like the opportunity to really sample, if you will, and learn from each of the boards and committees and commissions and every single thing on all these pieces of paper so that I can figure out where my strengths and weaknesses would be. And I don't feel compelled or drawn necessarily towards any of the other ones. For whatever reason, the election committee was where it was at for me. But aside from that, I would feel no shame in coming forward in a year or whatever, 2 years and saying, hey, I'd be really interested in serving on 1, 2, or 3, whatever. Is anybody interested in, not serving on that committee and trying to have that discussion?
Okay. Well, none of us was experts in sewers or cemeteries. We learned, and to me, it's part of being a team player. To me, it's the most conducive committee to anyone's schedule. It's part of learning the role, and the election committee literally is probably a half an hour of time this next year, and I'm not sure the year following more than that. But at any rate, does anyone else wish to speak to my motions? And moved and seconded to amend my original motion. If I hear none, we'll take a voice vote on whether or not to swap Catherine on the utilities in place of Michael.
I thought
Hearing, all right.
I'm sorry, clarification. I thought he's currently on utilities. Your motion would be to take him off and put me on.
He's not technically on. He's on in my proposal tonight.
But her motion included him on that, so we already voted on that.
Sure, and that amended my original motion, which hasn't yet been voted upon. So he's not officially on anything yet. Okay? He's not officially on anything. We're simply trying to amend further what is before the board currently, which would be to swap you and Michael. And would you take a voice vote, please, Ryan?
So just for clarification, I wasn't on Jim's original list, but Becky added me in a motion to utilities, and now Jim has made another motion, take me off utilities. And
You were on my original list, Michael.
Oh, I was.
That's what I was confused about.
Where?
They
Where am I original list?
printed on there.
Oh, sorry, I crossed myself
That's all
out
right.
and didn't see it.
That's okay.
So,
You want to be off. You've already crossed yourself off.
so is it,
All right.
is a yes vote
So
putting
a
who
yes
of
vote
us
would be
on
to
there?
make the swap.
But a yes vote is putting you on and taking Michael off.
Yep.
A yes vote would
A
be
yes
put
vote makes
Catherine
it
on.
Catherine Henry, John Schwam, and Gary Belding.
Yep. Yep.
And that's why I was just looking for
Right.
further clarification from Catherine if she likes the idea or doesn't like the
Well,
idea.
we know she doesn't. So,
No.
all right.
Not at all.
Ryan, you want to take that?
Supervisor.
Yes.
Clerk is a yes. Treasurer.
No.
Swam.
No.
Yes. Gary Bellman. Becky Steele.
Yes.
Catherine Henry.
No.
Okay, the yeses have it 4-3. Are there any other changes that anyone wishes to make? Proposal, yes.
I did have a question about disaster assessment team. Would it make sense to add more board members to that? How often does that one meet?
In my opinion, it just makes no sense whatsoever, if that's what you're asking.
I just wondered if there was reason to do 4 board members in the case of an emergency if they
The purpose of the disaster assessment team is to determine the value of the disaster, to approximate the value and cause of the disaster, and then to report that value.
Oh, okay.
So that's why we frequently have the assessor, as the person on there. So to answer my question, no, I don't think it makes any sense. It's not a meeting like, let's go discuss this. Let's go out there and let's measure, let's check out the property, and then we report what the damage is to then go forward. So we're designating the group now who goes out there and evaluates that damage.
I also have a question. So utilities, I understand utilities and services are not yet set, but when does it currently meet?
Services meets the Thursday prior to the second Monday at 4. The utilities meets on the second Monday after the board meeting. That is the current schedule.
To make sure I heard you correctly. You're saying as it currently sits, utilities meets right after?
Right after the board meeting on the second Monday of the month.
And service meets on
The Thursday before the second Monday, which is different than other things. It's the Thursday before the second Monday at 4 p.m. We're going to ask them to try to move that earlier so we can get the agenda out earlier for you, because that frequently is the holdup of the agenda. So that's one request. We're going to see if we can move that to Tuesday so we can get the board agenda out quicker.
And for my clarification, with the 12 times that we have now voted on changing the utilities committee, what currently sits as the motion before us is to have me, John, Gary serving on utilities with Jim as the alternate. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any other changes that anyone wishes to make?
I would prefer to be an alternate on the service committee. I don't even know at this point who's doing what. I know on one of the lists I was an alternate on that, and I valued that.
Okay.
I believe Ryan is on both, John is on both, so, but the one that before us, Becky is on.
I won't oppose, if you'd like to be the alternate on services, I would step aside. I'm happy to be in that role, but
And I also, I guess, I'm interested the whatever this, I don't even know. It just says a bunch of words. Legal, intergovernment, miscellaneous, cable. On one of the lists, you and I are both listed. On one list, it's just you. What does that do?
There's one list. It's got me named, and I've done nothing for that in 4 years. Supervisor's always been appointed legal, intergovernmental, almost like a resident agent in a sense, but really, we've tried to go back and find history and support for it. Find nothing. I wouldn't care if you eliminated it altogether. I've never met with myself, and it's never come about. So, Dan, maybe you have you've been here 35 years. What?
We know it started with Supervisor Hilbrand, and it's been the supervisor ever since, and we've never had a meeting. There's never been a discussion or use for it. Because it mentions cable, we were curious if one of the older cable contracts, before they went to the uniform video one, if it was a requirement in one of those contracts to have that person, but other than that, we don't know any purpose for it now. So.
Okay. So, I mean, would it be the preference of staff to eliminate that? Or
yes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, would it make everyone feel better if I wasn't appointed in that role?
I would make a motion to amend so that, I guess 3 parts, that I would be listed as the alternate on the services committee, that I would not be listed on the WCET board, and that the legal committee, or whatever we're going to call it, is essentially disbanded or not existent anymore.
Is there a second?
Could you repeat that one more time so that
That I would be
alternate on services?
Yep. That I would be taken off of the WCET board, and that legal is essentially not going to exist as anything anymore if it doesn't do anything.
Is there a requirement to how many people need to be on the WCET board?
I was going to ask that too. Good question, Ryan. 2? Okay.
They do not have to be trustees or board members.
Okay. Well, there's a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Does anyone have a great desire to be on WCET's board? No offense to you.
That means anybody in the crowd too, right? Because you said they don't have to be on the board?
Correct. You have to represent the township. So if you don't fill that spot, then the last one would still stay on there. So
if we need 2, I'd be willing to do it then.
I would be open to it too, Jim, if it's...
John, I think that you're a good fit.
Kind of has a heart for that,
Captain for WCET before.
You okay with that?
I would be okay with it.
You got a heart for, I mean, you connect well with those guys.
And that's why one of the lists had Becky and John, which I thought was good because there's supposed to be school representatives too, so they kind of did a double duty for Granville and Jensen Public Schools.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. An amendment to that motion would be to place John there on WCET. Is there a second to that motion? I'm making it right now.
I will just modify my motion if that's all right. It's just, instead of just taking me off, it's to put John in my place.
Okay. All right.
I second it.
Seconded.
You're getting a lot of practice calling the roll tonight, Mr. Clerk.
By disqualifying your motion, Catherine, do you mean to withdraw then placing yourself as alternate in my place on services?
No, I'm not.
Expanding legal?
What? No.
No.
I was essentially clarifying that because we have to have 2 people, instead of just removing me, that it would be to replace myself with John.
Clarification of her motion, and it was seconded. We're not going to go through. All right, so it's on the floor. She clarified, and I assume you who seconded it have no problem with that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ron.
Who seconded? Oh, I'm sorry. Ryan. Okay, Ryan seconded. All right. So, any more discussion on that point?
Somebody's got to read that motion back.
It is to add Catherine Henry instead of Jim Wieringa as the alternate on the services committee. It is to disband the legal, whatever that whole huge thing is, and then take Catherine Henry off and put John Schwam to the WCET board.
Okay. You good? All right. All right. Go ahead and call a roll on that one.
Supervisor?
Yes.
Clerk is a yes. Treasurer?
Yes.
John Schwab?
Yes.
Yes. Gary Velder? Becky Steele?
Yes.
Catherine Henry?
Yes.
All right, and if you're keeping score at home, that was our first unanimous vote, I think.
Nope, it's two. We got two.
Okay, all right.
Two from there.
Actually, more than.
All right.
Said quite a few.
Now, with all of that and all the various amendments to my original motion, are you ready to vote at this time?
I call for the question.
Yes. What's that?
I call for the question.
You call for the question, okay. All right, so would you take roll on that one as well, please?
And this is the complete list.
Yes.
With all
All the
the changes
amendments.
we've made.
Quick rundown, just because so much has changed so in time. Currently, who is on services?
Brad, I think who's on first?
If you wanted to do a quick rundown, finance is plus Ryan minus John. Election, you have plus Catherine minus John. Utilities, plus John minus Catherine. VBA is plus Mike minus Ryan. The CBA is plus Gary. Then utilities is minus Mike plus Catherine. And then you have services as the alternate plus Catherine minus Jim. And WCET minus Catherine plus John. And legal is removed.
I got lost along the way, but I trust somebody who's listening.
Just get
I think
a
it's
list
Becky,
of-
John, and Ryan would be services if we don't further amend it, and then I would be listed as the alternate on services.
It's the one committee that we haven't dissected, but yes, that is how it
Okay,
currently stands.
we haven't hit services yet. I was going to ask if we could just get a list of election committee. Here are the board members that are on it, rather than plus minus.
I'll go right down the list as I have it, and then you can tell me if it's incorrect, if anybody thinks that it's incorrect. Planning Commission is Gary. VBA is Michael. Construction is Gary. And then the second page, election is Ryan, Catherine, and myself. We did not make any changes to disaster assessment. Legal has been eliminated. We did not make any changes to Jenison Historical. WCET is Michael and John. We did not make any changes to the FOIA coordinator. Utilities is currently Catherine, John, Gary, with Jim as the alternate. Services is Becky, John, Ryan, with Catherine as the alternate. And finance is Jim, Michael, and Ryan, with John Schwam as the alternate.
You want us to applaud?
No, but I want you to tell me if that was correct.
Very impressive.
That is my understanding.
Yeah. Okay. Now, he's calling for a vote. Now let's vote.
All right,
You're always going to start with me, Ryan. Yeah.
I'm going to go right around the horn.
My question would be, so we never addressed services. Anybody want to address services? We good with it as is? I mean, we've gone down the list. To me, it doesn't matter.
Right? We have to vote now? I thought that's what that meant, but I am not an expert on procedure. I'm comfortable with services.
And I am also.
Is there anyone who's uncomfortable with services?
I know your name was on one of them originally, one of the lists, regardless of whose list we're calling what, but were you interested in being on services?
To me, it doesn't matter. I go to every single meeting, whether I'm on the committee or not. And I don't get paid, by the way. I just attend for free.
Having said that, John, he's opened the door to you. If you feel like you have too much, would you?
No, I enjoy being on
All right.
services.
Very good. Okay. All right, then now people have spoken about services, yes? All right.
Good. Just want to make sure everybody's
Let's,
good.
you bet. Let's take the,
Supervisor?
yes.
Clerk is a yes. Treasurer?
Yes.
John Schwam?
Yes.
Gary Velder?
Yes.
Becky Steele?
Yes.
Catherine Henry?
With objections, but yes.
With reservation. All right. That's item 12. Item 12 is over. Item 13, sidewalk waiver request for 44th Street. Is there a motion to either grant or deny the sidewalk waiver request for 44th Street as spoken to tonight by Mr. Barr?
I'll make the motion to approve the sidewalk waiver request for 44th Street on property identified as 303 Weisner.
Support. Okay, moved and supported. Discussion.
I can understand and value some of the comments that were made, seems like 6 hours ago now at this point, about that topic, but I do have some concerns. Sidewalk is one of those things that, my husband and I have both served on different committees when we were in different communities, in a different community, I should say. We've served on Planning Commission and ZBA. We've certainly had the sidewalk that goes nowhere argument or whatever in a variety of different parcels of land. To me, this one's different in that when I have driven past there and then gone back and looked on Google Maps about this, first of all, as far as you guys see, I'm not touching it, right? So,
You're further down the end of the table than we typically sit, and I think that just you might be hitting a teeny bit of a dead zone.
Okay. I'm gonna get a little closer to you, Ryan. Okay. It's on TV though, so it's okay. Anyway, my concern, I'm just trying to think of some of the things that were kind of talked about, which I don't think there was really anything shocking or new that came out of the conversation today so much as it was, they were all things that were brought about in the application. But when I saw the discussion about how the south side of the street, that would have the sidewalk, is there no map that was part of I didn't print the entire packet today. If there was a map, I guess I would ask that maybe we can put that up. Might be easier but if not,
I can spell it out. There's sidewalks on the north side starting at 8th Avenue going to the west.
Yes.
And then they're on the south side starting at 8th going to the east. So people can cross there, yeah. Right.
So my concern though is, without really being able to visually point at things, and that, was that good? Can we pull it out so we could see, yeah, just a little bit more. So we have some apartments, back in there, and we have, that one long road is, condominiums. My husband and I actually looked at a house or condo there for sale when we were moving to the area. At any rate, there's, a significant amount of people that, although the entrance or exit to their particular community might not end up like down there, where you kind of see that gray bubble that says Polaris. You do have a lot of people that are needing to get to places, and so you have Burger King is actually where the word steak is, and you have Steak and Shake. Oh, that would be. I'm not sure I'm smart enough for that. Okay. So Burger King is right here, and you have Panera Bread, Steak and Shake is right there. So you have, some restaurants and things. You have Walmart down here, not on the map, but, and it's not going to show because Google Maps wasn't apparently, didn't update it since whatever it's called. But it's a gas station that has, it's not just a tiny little gas station. It has a lot of different things and essentially groceries. Depending on how you cook or don't cook. So my concern is that there's sidewalk that essentially is right here, and nothing is, right here. But again, it's not a discussion about a sidewalk that would go nowhere. So if this were like the end of whatever, and then all of a sudden it's industrial, it'd be a totally different conversation. But we also have a ton of houses that are up in here as well. And so I've seen, for example, this sidewalk. I'm just someone that likes to walk a lot, and so to me, when I've driven past that, and I used to work at a school not that far that way, that every single day I was driving on 44th Street, and all through the winter, this particular sidewalk, for one reason or another, it just seemed like the way that the winds would blow everything, it was really not passable. even if somebody went out there and had shoveled it, just the way that it being on the south side and the way that there's a lot of trees, all of this is totally lined with trees. None of it's open at all, not until you get around to the bend, and then you have that neighborhood. And so it's not really something that's, even though I think it's a much wider, it might even be a 6-foot sidewalk in parts of that. It always seemed to have some sort of, huge pileup of snow or ice or whatever. And I don't think it was necessarily on the part of an owner of the property. I think it's just the way that the wind would blow there. And so here, if we're gonna say that this property is not going to be required to have sidewalks, then we are forever essentially precluding people that might be right here. Now maybe the people way up here can go ahead and cross, but again, I have concerns about this part of the sidewalk on the south side. I never noticed an issue anywhere along here with that part of the sidewalk. But I would have a concern about the people that are over here that might be trying to get over to Walmart because it's, going to be a place where people might need to get some supplies. But also right here as well, that if we're precluding this area, then we're just never going to have, basically it's starting the trend that none of this will ever need to have a sidewalk. And I have huge reservations about that because of the type of home communities that are back in here and back over here that people on either side would need to get to either this gas station that really does have quite a bit of amenities or down here to Walmart. And to cross 44th Street, especially when you have the S-curve thing going on right here, and people are just getting past the light and getting up to 55 miles an hour, you're not going to be, to me it's insufficient. It's totally irrelevant to say there's a sidewalk on the other side of the street because you're not going to be able to, if you came out right here and you were trying to get down here, you're not going to be able to simply cross 44th Street. So to get, and really then to get to, if somebody's coming out right here, whether you're trying to go this way or whether you're trying to go this way, so whether you're going to Chenoa or whether you're going to Eighth, you're essentially left with zero way to get to a sidewalk at all, the way it currently sits. So I'm concerned about people that, I don't walk that area myself, but I do have concerns about all of the people that live right here who would need to get to those places, and the whole reason why we have the sidewalk ordinances. So I would just have a huge concern that by precluding that this whole section wouldn't have a sidewalk, we're forever saying then that, because of course then if it's being developed specifically with that exception in mind, it wouldn't be appropriate at some point later on to say, well, hey, 10 years down the road, you built something really awesome, but we're going to go ahead and try to make you a sidewalk now. You're forever precluding that. So
duly noted. Duly noted. Anyone else have thoughts about this?
I think my thought would be that my opinion has changed on this one. As they said during public comment, this was originally denied and is now coming back. For all the reasons that you're stating, my opinion was to deny this waiver request previously. The thing that has changed for me is as we've been working on sidewalk options other places in the township, I've seen some estimates for how expensive it is to put sidewalks in with the dramatic elevation changes. And so what has changed for me is I feel like it is cost prohibitive for them to put the sidewalks in. And my guess is that development of this area might hinge on that. So if we deny the waiver and say you have to put sidewalks in if you're going to develop it, then my guess is that there's a decent chance that they then wouldn't develop it, so sidewalks still wouldn't get put in. Or we can approve the waiver so it would get developed.
You just mentioned that you had some additional information. When I hear the term cost prohibitive, typically in an application I would expect that there would have been some sort of indication about what that cost is. So I was really shocked to see it not in there. Do you know?
Well, I think that it isn't on the township board to have produced that, and so maybe the gentleman that was here talking about
I meant on the application.
Yeah, but when we were talking about sidewalks on Port Sheldon, way on the other side of the township, I just remember looking at estimates and saying, whoa, when they're talking about it being cost prohibitive for elevation changes, that is a significantly larger cost than I ever would have guessed. And I don't have those numbers in front of me, but that past experience is what has changed my mind and is the reason that I made the motion to approve it this time around, even though I was firmly against it previously.
Dan, can I ask, on the other side of the road, when the pavement was put in, was that done by the township? Because it's consistent all the way up. I always felt that the township did that with a grant, and maybe the bridges were put in.
A large section was done by the township, and you can see some that's concrete was done by the property owner.
Okay, but most of it is asphalt, and it was paid for by the township on the other side of the road.
The trail, yes. The trail was paid for by the township, but you'll see it breaks up between concrete and trail. It's because the concrete was put in by the property owner.
Okay.
Is it,
I was going to say, as to the cost, I believe it was a year ago, but I want to say it was $250,000 for fill and sidewalk? Ballpark?
Probably. And to follow on that, there's no waiver. Property will.
It will.
And that was one of the concerns I had a year ago. I'm not on utilities, but I was at the meeting. But because of the cost and also the fact that Sunnybrook, their golf course, actually there's a tunnel that goes under 44th Street there. That elevation change, do you know what hole that is? I don't know. Oh, okay. So that just gives you an idea of the elevation change. So for what Sunnybrook would spend to put in, if they were forced to put in sidewalk, it would literally be in the millions because they would either have to bring in fill or some sort of pylons and elevated deck.
It would be cheaper for Sunnybrook to run a sidewalk to their tunnel and have people cross across and then get on the sidewalk on the other side, probably.
Right. I'm just because I'm one of those. I don't like sidewalks to nowhere, but it's one of those is just because of the cost of what that would be. Never happened. Never happened. One in a million.
Anyone else wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I understand you got apartments and everything there. There's a crosswalk at Kennewa and 44th Street, so if they got to get across to Walmart, there's another gas station there. The brick station is on this corner. If the 8th Avenue residents want to use that, they can go down. There's no sidewalks on 8th Avenue either, so those individuals are still walking on the side of the road. We have quite a few sidewalks in nowhere in this township. There's one along Chicago Drive that Sunset Manor put in Waterford. It's down in the gully there. You can look at it sometime. It's all full of trees.
And that produced Chad Tuttle on this board right there.
What's that?
That produced Chad Tuttle right there.
Yeah, well, we didn't make them build up any ground up to put that sidewalk. It's down at least 8 feet from the top of the road. So, I mean, there's been precedents that we've had waivers. I think that property would be very difficult. I drove by it. I know that piece of property. I think it'd be very difficult and very, very expensive to put a sidewalk in there. I could just give you a cost estimate of running concrete sidewalk 5 foot wide, ballpark, and that's if the grade is perfect and it's ready to go. It's around about $30 a running foot. I don't know how much frontage they got there, but you can start running math. That's not fill, that's not excavating, that's not getting it ready. So
actually, no, I can't start running the math. Can you do? I have no estimate at all what that $30 would then.
That's just concrete. That's just the concrete of putting the sidewalk in. That's not any excavating yet.
Well, and this is where your area of expertise would be helpful, but you're assuming there's a lot of other pieces that maybe someone like me would just know. I mean, so I was going to ask you, did I hear you right to say $250,000 was a number that?
On the light side.
But the number that I heard was correct. It was $250,000. Okay.
Right.
Do you think that would be? Does that sound about right? At least on a minimum level to you, or?
I would say the way things are going now, it's low.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I'm watching street costs and all these other things right now. They've been going up astronomically in the last year or so. So I would say $250,000 to run that sidewalk would be low.
Okay.
Because the problem is when you bring fill in, if you got 11 feet of fill, you don't just go to the edge of the sidewalk and drop down. You got to bring 11 feet of fill out so it runs out a ways away to back up that sidewalk so the water doesn't wash the sidewalk out. You're talking a lot of excavating and a lot of monkeying to get that ready, and that's assuming that that soil's decent there. If they got to take out bad soil, I don't remember what that piece was years ago, but if they got to under-excavate the poor dirt out of there to put in good dirt, that's even be more expensive. I mean, there's a lot of, I understand why the developer hasn't given us a lot of information, and part of it is because there's a lot of cost involved just to get that information. But just ballparking it, I'd say it's an expensive endeavor.
Mr. Supervisor, could we call for a vote?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment myself. I'm glad to hear that we have proponents of sidewalks. We have many on this board that are proponents. In fact, I remember at great political pain making them put sidewalks in on 8th Avenue there going to the north and having 50, 60, 100 people in this room, all unhappy, but I think now grateful in the long run. So yeah, we have proponents of sidewalks here. It'd be great for those of you who are on utilities because you get to talk about these a lot. And just because you grant a waiver doesn't mean that you've permanently prohibited the township from requiring it in the future. So understand that as well. And maybe over the next 4 years, the committee, the utilities committee will recommend some bold action of the board in terms of greater walkability, accessibility within the township. It's certainly something I ran on. I know a number of you have. But we've also experienced enough of these where you can kind of start to recognize the ones that just politically and timing-wise and so on don't make a lot of sense. So,
I would like to make one comment, and I'll make this to, I don't know if I can do this or not, but if I were the developer and he got a waiver for this property, I would look for a way to whatever he puts there to get some sort of access to maybe the exit of the apartments there. So there is a way to walk across those parking lots to Walmart so that, okay, I don't have a sidewalk in front of my property, but at least this property can have access to be able to get to where all them parking lots hooked together all the way back to Kennewick. Because you can probably, I know Greenridge Realty, there's a few other commercial buildings in there, but it's just something to think about when you start looking at bringing a proposal for some sort of a project.
Very good. Okay.
Jim, Joel has a comment back there.
This was originally proposed a year and a half ago, so we suggested that the development of this would include a walking trail around the perimeter of the property. So we are sensitive to the walkable township. It's going to be a sizable cost. Now, it doesn't mean it needs to be a 6-foot trail when it's a walking trail around the perimeter.
Right.
Having a walking trail around a 22-acre parcel, not a bad idea.
Yeah, encouraging. Okay. All right, let's just take this by voice vote. We don't need a roll call. That's right, Dan? This is not a roll call. All right, so all in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Is the aye to approve the waiver?
I'm sorry, yes, to approve the waiver. The motion before you is to grant the waiver.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Yep. And anyone opposed? All right, so that motion to grant the sidewalk waiver is passed.
Good.
Item 14, amended Michigan Mutual Aid Box Alarm System Association Agreement. Sir, anyone who wishes to place a motion before the board? All right, I will move that we approve this agreement.
Support.
Moved and supported.
Sorry.
I had a chance to talk to the chief at length about this. We'd have liked to have him here tonight, but it wasn't able to happen. But he explained to me how we used to be part of an agreement. It could even require you to go state to state. He said we dropped out of that agreement. There were a couple other things too that he didn't like about it. He's wanting to re-enter it at this point because it gives you such flexibility. He said it gives you protection. It gives you greater liability protection when you do aid others. He said we will limit it to the surrounding counties. He said I'm not going to Detroit or Bay City or whatever to respond to a call. Ottawa, I think even Ottawa. I don't know if I wrote it down.
Communities that are
adjacent, right? Communities, and as you saw, it's terminable with notice. I think 30-day notice, something to that effect. And we talked about it at length. He said this is something we do for one another, and this is a better way to do it than they've done in the past in terms of providing protection and what have you, and more order to it. And so, for what it's worth, that's the chief's perspective in a nutshell. Anybody wish to address the motion that's before you?
Point of clarification, you said 14, and I must be looking at a different list somehow. You started talking about what I'm seeing is marked as 15, but the motion was on the Michigan Mutual Aid box alarm system. Is that what we're talking about?
Yep.
So apparently that was...
Missed cameras.
Yes. Okay. So I didn't notice that was...
You just jumped over...
Did I jump over one?
Nope. There was one that was on our November 23 agenda that was not listed on our November 30th agenda, security cameras, which was the item 14 last week.
Okay.
And then was not included in tonight's agenda.
Sorry.
So now we're on item 14. On the November 23 agenda, item 14 was security cameras.
Okay.
That item does not appear on this tonight's agenda. So everything has been misnumbered or has been renumbered.
Okay.
One
So
backwards.
the motion is properly before you as to the amended Michigan Mutual Aid box alarm system. Questions, comments?
I just thought there was, it's not, especially as an attorney, it's obviously not the longest contractor document I've ever reviewed, but considering, several people being new, even not everyone being new, there's just a lot that we've been considering tonight, and my concern is to rush into signing, quite frankly, any contract, but it just feels like there is, albeit not that many pages, 13, but my concern is that there's enough here that we should have a little bit more time to digest this, and whether it be on the very next meeting or whatnot, there's some big, there were just some items that I think are of significant concern enough that I would ask that we have a little bit more time to really look at it, because this is one of those things that I wouldn't want people to just go, I don't really know contracts, it's not going to be, I'm fine.
So I'm going to take that as a motion to table this. Is there a second for that motion? Anyone?
I would support that to table.
Okay, there's a motion. It's been supported to table that item. A discussion about the decision of whether or not to table this agreement.
I'm a little concerned with...
It's not really a...
Actually, I don't think you can have...
Discussion on the table?
There's no discussion. Okay. No. So it's tabled if to support.
It's a vote.
You have to vote on the table.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you for that reminder. So item number 14 has been tabled.
No, you have to
We need to vote.
Okay.
The vote to table.
All right. Let's vote to table. Voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Can we vote?
You want to vote? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Ryan.
We can't make a comment.
Yep. Now is the time to make the comment.
My concern is...
okay. All right.
It's not a roll call vote. It's just a voice vote.
But I can call a roll call when I want to. So, if somebody wants to.
A resident attorney. It doesn't matter, but...
True enough, Dan. I don't have to, but I may. And so
Anybody can request a roll call.
If someone's requested, I'll go ahead and grant that. Okay. So you want to call by roll?
All right, we're going to mix it up and go the other way around.
I've been waiting. Wait.
So this is motion to table.
Yeah.
Okay, then I wanted to, but I'll still say yes.
Thank you, Stu.
Yeah. No.
Yes. No.
Yes.
Okay. 4-3. Item is tabled. Item 15, proposed secondary and subdivision resurfacing for 2021. You all received the list that was highlighted for you. I just want to comment again for those who are newer. You'll see a list like this each year. Oftentimes it'll come up through the utilities committee. Without getting too deep in the weeds, we have county responsibility for our roads. They will fund our primary roads and their resurfacing, sometimes enlargement from time to time, and they have a running schedule of so many years out, so we can see those coming. But they do not, does the county, and they haven't for a number of years had sufficient funds to take care of our lesser streets, if you will. And that's true not just of Georgetown, but of other townships and so on within the county. Consequently, if you don't plan well, you don't budget well, you have roads fall in disrepair. And if you want to hear from your constituents quickly, let your roads fall in disrepair. I'm proud of this township, and long before I was ever here, the cycle and the path in which they put the township to allocate significant dollars each year, above and beyond what the county would do, to take care of our roads in such that we are on a 15 to 20 year cycle. That's not bad. If you've driven these roads like I have, and you looked at the ones that are on here as well as the ones like Coconut and the ones that are next to come up, you know what? They're not terrible. And the point isn't to wait until they are terrible till you lose your car in a pothole. They're to take care of these things before you have to completely redo them. And so, we've got a good system. It's not to say that, from time to time, each year you might say, you know what, there's this road that I think is being overlooked that's really important, and it's in terrible repair, and I think we're missing it. But if that happens, then we look at maybe removing a road. But again, I'm very grateful, as one who drives the roads like you do, that this is well budgeted and well supported, and over time it's really kept things, I think, pretty smooth in the township. So that being said, are there comments, questions, or otherwise about this, or do you wish to put a motion in front of the board first, and then we can start discussion about it?
I'll make a motion to approve the proposal in the amount of $1,531,844.95, which includes the roads that were highlighted in green in our packet through Yorkdale Court.
Support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. And discussion.
I was actually able to spot check at least a dozen of these, any of the other ones, and they seem to be pretty spot on with some of these, especially Rogers Drive, Center Industrial. There's some pretty rough ones out there. I guess my one question would be the roads needing sanitary sewer. How are those handled? They have to have sewer before they would be able to get redone?
Of late, and again, you can correct me, Dan, but I think we've sort of put them on a path of waiting to resurface and thinking that there could be this investment made in the infrastructure there, right, with the sewer and so on, and not wanting us to tear up good road. But I think the question maybe that he's really asking, Dan, beyond that is, so what if you never put it in or force it to be put in? I mean, how long do you make them wait to?
Well, that would be something the board would have to address. The board made the decision that we didn't want to put money into streets that needed sewer and then have to tear them up so quickly if they were going to have sewer installed. So at that time, it's only been a few years, they were just not going to be added to the list until the board changed, some status on those roads. So yes, they're held down until there's sewer. If they get to such a deterioration, the board will have to look at that at a time. The intent was to then install sewer, or reviewed at that time. Now, this board may change their mind, but that's kind of how we're operating still based on that previous policy.
I do agree that some of the roads are, not in the greatest shape, but I have a significant concern, especially hearing that there's a 15 to 20 year cycle. There's only 2 roads on the proposal that are older than the year 2000. All of them are newer. Several of them, the last go-round of material, if you will, was actually placed during new construction. And we have roads that are as new, I think, unless there's newer, there's several that are as new as 2007. And so knowing what I know about, different areas in the township, there's different ways, you can look at a project like this. You can look at it in terms of, what's going to be the cheapest, because we have an estimate on cost for resurfacing that. So you could just say, well, we want to get as many roads as we possibly can every year, so we'll just go with the cheapest and until our budget runs out. You end up doing the most roads that way. You can do it based on, simply by the township rating, which is one of the other factors that we're given here, because this list does not go verbatim by the township rating. And then another way, just based on how the information was presented to us here, would be to go by the year that it was last resurfaced. And so to save everybody headache on that, my point of conversation stems from that. So I actually have printed up the different versions, if you will, of looking at it that way. I don't know if I'm counting correctly. I think that's 4. I have extra copies if anybody from the public wants to look at this. I also put it on my website just to make sure if we ran out that people wanted to look, they could find it. And I, want to make sure. I think that's the whole thing. I just missed the paper clip.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger.
There's 3 of these, and then there's one more paper.
Dan, while she's handing that out, could you speak to some of the efficiencies that sometimes play a part in terms of
I'm
how
ready.
we...
Actually, if I could please finish my comment. I already handed those out. To me, what I wasn't going to try to be necessarily an expert at my first meeting on the total dollar amount that we're looking at, because again, to me, the biggest struggle, as I kind of voiced earlier, is we, had quite a few pages of financials and within that for each piece, how each dollar is spoken for. Basically, my concern was if we take the dollar amount, under the theory that I'm on the edge of the dead zone, I'm going to just go closer over here to Ryan, I guess. But if we take the total dollar amount that is proposed, that was in Becky's motion, it is basically $1,530,000. So each of the different ways, there's infinite ways you can always look at a project when there's this many variables, right? So each of the ones that is shown here on these different things is close to that dollar amount. So I wasn't trying to change the overall dollar amount. I was just looking at different ways of things here. So to me, as you can see, I showed what it would look like if we just kind of went with the straight financial situation. And I actually, to Ryan's question, there's also the issue of whether you want to address people that have the sewer issue, whether they've put in sewer or not, or there's even a house. I think one property that keeps showing up was taken off because there's no houses on that and it's a dead-end road. But essentially, there's 3 main ways to look at it if you don't account for those. And so to me, if you're looking at you're looking at the condition. We have 2 different measures here about what the condition is. And I don't disagree that there are roads on this list that are in bad shape. But if you look at parts of Coconut, or you look at Michael Court or Kevin Court or Michael Drive, or some of these other ones that are from 1993 or 1998 or 1997, and they were resurfaced back then. They weren't even new construction back then. It's obvious to see why they need to be done and why they should have been done before. Whereas, you look at the ones that are proposed, and most of them, except for 2, I think, are actually 2000 and newer. Many of them are like 2007, 2006. Several of them were, new construction at the time, and most of them are actually all in the same neighborhood, which if we still had the map up from the last discussion on sidewalks, it actually would show, because a lot of them are between Kenowa and 8th, south of 44th Street, and that's a fairly relatively new area. So in my looking at things, of visually looking at the street involved, as well as looking at what seems realistic, and I did not know the 15 to 20 year cycle, but my concern is based on what the streets actually look like, and why, looking at the year they were last resurfaced, I would have a huge concern with going, for those reasons, with the particular homes that were on the green proposed list. Instead, it would seem more appropriate to go with the year they were last resurfaced, and you'll see they very naturally, you are getting the ones that have, poor ratings, and the cost is not, it's not such that the cost is so much more for doing those roads that all of a sudden, instead of doing, 35 roads, now all of a sudden you're going to do only 12. It's actually very comparable. So if you went with the age, it would be, 31 roads is what you would cover, and you'd actually come in 10,000 under budget from the proposal. So That's, I guess, where I'm at with it. I think there's enough poor roads around the community that are much older than all these other roads that are in worse condition. Not just residential, but residential where you always see a ton of kids running around. I mean, my daughter said to me at one point about having been on one of these roads, and she said, well, Mom, I really want to learn, my 6-year-old is saying this, Mom, I really want to learn how to be an expert on rollerblading on bumpy roads. And I'm like, honey, that's not a thing. Like, no one's an expert on rollerblading on bumpy roads. You don't have to learn that. So to me, I think it'd be more important that we take a really hard look at this information and consider doing the older roads first.
Catherine, when you put together this proposal, did you share it with Dan and ask how we came about with the original proposal? Was there a discussion with him and about your feelings before we got
I
here?
didn't see Dan's name on the proposal, so I didn't know Dan was the one that put it together. So no, I didn't ask Dan about it.
It would be for history or to gather information.
I don't need history. I looked at the roads themselves. I looked at the communities I looked at them on Google Maps. I looked at them physically and drove on them and walked on them. Not every single one, but on quite a few of them. And the ones that are older, by and large, are in at least the same poor condition, if not poorer, in reality, to the ones that are all built in 2000, or, redone in 2000, 2007, that kind of thing. So to me, regardless of who put it together, it's not a personal thing. I don't care what the history is. I know what the roads are now, and there's been a problem with how the lists were put together before, in my opinion. I don't want to go into all the details of that. I don't think it's relevant. I just think going forward, we need to make sure that we're looking at resurfacing ones that need it the most. And in my opinion, that's what it would be. It would be the oldest ones that are really in a bad shape.
If there's anyone
so
here...
are you asking us to turn down staff's proposal?
Yes, I would ask to do that, yeah.
And here's what I suggest. If there's someone here who wants to engage in a serious discussion about this and entertain what she's suggesting, then you be the one maybe to make a motion to table. Because I think given the hour, if we're going to go through road by road with a new group and a new order that none of us has seen yet, it might be best served to discuss that in the next meeting. If you're not so moved, then we'll continue with the motion that's before you. I'll throw that out there.
I'd be willing to make a motion to table.
All right. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. There will be no discussion on that. And you're my resident Robert's Rules guy. I can tell already, Gary. All right. So let's take a vote on the decision to table the road resurfacing. Keep in mind, we want to be sure to take this up soon enough because they start letting out their contracts. So all in favor of the motion to table, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
Aye. Yeah. All right. It passes 4-3. All right. So we'll go on then to item...
Jim, would this go to utilities for recommendation?
Dan, I mean, that would be logical, but I'm not sure.
It normally would, and that's the board's pleasure. I mean, if we already have our proposal, you can bring it straight back to the board. Yep. We would love to get this approved at our next meeting because the road commission bid letting.
Yep.
There's 2 bid lettings. We'd like to be on the early one. We've
Sure.
always gotten better pricing.
Sure.
So.
Yep. So between now and 2 weeks from now,
right.
will the utilities committee be meeting?
It's now that we know who it is, we'll attempt to have a meeting scheduled. Yeah.
I expect we'll talk about it there, and then we'll talk about it again here. Yep.
Rod put the list together here, and he personally inspected the list and has a lot of reasons why he chose the certain ones bunched together, so that can all be explained at that meeting. So.
Okay.
So could he be?
Sorry.
Would he normally be present, or could he be present at that utility meeting? Then
He normally would be.
Okay.
What's that?
No.
I was a no. Yep. And feel free, obviously, Rod, when you've done, and I think we've all done our homework and driven some of these, but Rod's done a lot as well with that. Feel free to lead off on one like that in the future to say, you know what, I'd like to speak to that if I could. Say, sure, you got the floor. Okay. Item number 16, 2021 Grand Rapids Press legal publication rates, which have not changed from the previous year. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. There's fewer and fewer options of where we can publish legal notices. It's a reality of the present day. Any discussion on that point?
I just have some questions.
Okay.
How many do we typically would we submit in a calendar year, do you know?
It varies greatly based on how many applications we receive that require notification.
Do you know what we're at so far in 2020?
I don't have the top of my head, no.
Okay.
I know we have to publish them. The board simply has to choose a paper of general circulation that they want. If they want to choose a different one, the board could do so, although there's not a lot of choices. And so you don't have any flexibility when there's no competition, and law requires us to publish, so.
Are there any that, and I'm sorry, I didn't reread this part of the meeting packet before we came in. I don't recall there being any reference to that there were any identified that would be choices. Like this was the only one that was identified for us, right?
The board identified the Grand Rapids Press as the paper of general circulation in the township, so unless you picked another paper that we could then get prices from.
Right, but I mean nothing else was mentioned in the packet. I didn't miss
Correct.
that. Okay.
Oh, yes, yes.
That's all the questions I had.
Okay. All in favor? We placed a motion out there, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I don't recall. I was getting along. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. That motion is carried. Item 17, for those of you who hung in there. Second public comment period. As I said earlier, about 3 hours ago, you have the opportunity now to speak to anything that you wish. And John, I can see in your eyes, even with that mask on, that you're going to say something. So why don't you lead us off here, John? Welcome.
John Cade, 7869 Parkside Court, Jenison.
I read lips. Would you be okay unmasking it at the podium so I can hear you better? Thank you very much.
7869 Parkside Court, Jenison. Obviously, some of you know me, a few of you don't. Up until the past year, I've attended a lot of these board meetings. Actually, in 2012, I ran for trustee, but John got a few hundred more votes than I did, and he's been on since then. Some of you have actually been to my house, Mike, Brian, and several years ago, Becky. So I know some of you better than others. I would like to congratulate the new trustees. Name, Gary, and Catherine, Brian, and Mike Bosch for his new position. I like the fact that the consent agenda is broken out. There's been times in the past, and I don't know if that would be always, but I would surely recommend if you go over every item instead of just the consent agenda. There's been times in the past that it's just like everything gets passed and nothing gets discussed, at least in public. And there's been times that I asked something to be taken off the consent agenda, and it was usually put then on its own agenda. But I think that is very important that you don't just lump a bunch of stuff together. And I like Kathy, your due diligence of your comments. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, John. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Be sure to give us your name and address. You've got 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you for several things. First, I'm now on the EDC board. My name is Sandy Bloom Rosskamp.
Thank you.
I'm a recent resident of Georgetown Township. I'm at 2487 Cedar West Drive. I've been attending the board meetings via Zoom for the last year or so, since March anyway. And I certainly appreciate all of your time. I know it's a thankless job. You don't hear from us unless there's a problem, someone's unhappy. And I've served on boards before, and I know that it takes a lot of time and a lot of reading and a lot of research. And so I certainly appreciate all your time. So I wanted to thank you for that. I also wanted to thank you for the way that you've conducted these meetings. You've been very respectful over the last year. I've seen that there's been disagreements, but they've been handled in a very respectful way. And I think at the end of the day, after there have been disagreements, there's a vote, you all come together and you support the vote that's been taken place. I attended last week via Zoom and then tonight, and I just want to say that I am a little saddened to see how it's gotten antagonistic. And I hope this isn't a next 6 years kind of a thing. I appreciate all of your time, but I do want to remember that, you know, the purpose of this board is to make a positive difference in the members and the residents of Georgetown Township. That I feel like that's the reason you're voted here, and I hope that we continue that same purpose going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments and reminder. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the second public comment period. Did I go too quick? No? Nobody rising? All right. Item 18, discussion and general information. I alluded to this before as a sort of a catch-all in that they might be, hey, I'm attending this conference coming up. I'm going to be sitting in on this workshop. I think I'll have some good materials. Or I went to something. Or, by the way, there's something I'd like to maybe refer to a committee or we ought to talk about as a board. We will be having 2 meetings, it sounds like, each month, all right? And there will be a lot of opportunities both in subcommittees as well as in the board to bring up discussion points. So given the hour tonight, be kind to us. There's certainly things you can bring up, but let's remember we can also keep generating thoughts and ideas. I had a couple of things I think I'm going to table in my own mind. But starting, I guess, from my left to my right, out here in the end, John, anything?
The library looks beautiful. As you mentioned, the tree. I haven't had a chance. I saw the lights down there, but not lit up downtown. I'm kind of excited to see that. Amazed what Allendale has done. I'm not sure the money behind that, but Allendale is just incredible what they've done. Our downtown area is looking beautiful, getting a lot of very, very positive comments. People are proud of that area.
Good. Kind of moving across the front. You don't have to say anything, but you're welcome to.
Yeah,
Yep, go ahead.
I brought up earlier the property purchase that we're looking at.
Right.
By Maplewood Lake. I talked to Dan about that today, and I understand that there's a purchase agreement been worked on already, and getting close to being finalized. I do have some concerns about that purchase. First of all, I think we paid way too much money for it. I don't think that property's worth what we're giving for it. I also have concerns there's no end game to that piece of property. If you're going to purchase it, I think there should be costs put together on what that property is going to be used for, how much money we're going to spend to update it. There's a lot of issues with that piece of property, and I can address those things because I worked that piece of property when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
I weeded onions there for Jake Nine-Eyes. I grew up on Cypress Street when they dug Maplewood Lake.
Sure.
So I know a lot about that property. I know about the gas line that runs in between Maplewood Park and that property, which is going to be a difficult thing to be able to join. You're not going to be able to put anything across it, per se, because I built a lot of condominiums alongside that same property, that same pipeline, and they have a ton of rules, and I know them rules because I've had to build decks within 25 feet of that thing, and there will be a guy that will show up and explain to you what the rules are. So I'm just saying, it seems like that thing was decided upon last minute to buy that, and I just am a little concerned that we spent too much money on that piece of property. I do that for a living. I buy and sell property, and I'm going down the road. From what I understand to Dan, we're already into the contract that thing, but I don't see a plan what we're going to do with it after we get it, and how much it's going to cost to do whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you're asking any of us who voted for it to quit ourselves, but I'll give you just a quick comment, at least from my own perspective.
Sure.
Which was, it was the long game. That is, if you look at a topography, look at the aerial view, and the idea is that piece is part sort of like Ottawa County has done, and albeit at a much grander scale with a lot of private and public involvement. along the Grand River. I think the idea being that we sort of have a strip of green going across that could eventually go all the way to Bauer, potentially, over time, maybe with future boards, all the way across through Maplewood, up to Baldwin, across Baldwin, through Woodcrest, and then eventually over, I'm not sure how far, where it might join, but possibly, I think we talked about 12 or something of that nature. But I can only speak for myself and say it seems like an opportunity to just add a piece to that puzzle, which doesn't seem to have an immediate effect other than there it is and you own it. But I'm sure that's not persuadable. I'm just saying that's at least the rationale in terms of my view of the long run. I'd really love to preserve some green space where we feel like we're filling up every nook and cranny with building. I know that won't be a built area.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But you do realize that the same neighbors that live next to that property will have a zoning official if they let their yard go to weeds, and now you're going to have 30 acres of weeds. I mean, it's like, what do there's no plan for it. So that's my thing. We spent $335,000 on 30 acres, and you're going to spend $1.3 million trying to do something with it. And I'm like, that's a $1.6 million expenditure, but nobody wants to talk about the 1.3. So that's a little bit of my concern with the Zoom meetings too. I don't think that the public even knows you guys are buying that piece of property. So.
Yep. So a little bit of water under the bridge, but duly noted. And I don't suspect you'd vote for something like that while you're on the board.
Not for that price.
Yep.
I'm not saying we don't buy property.
Sure.
I'm just saying if a farmer bought that for $3,000 an acre and farmed it 10 years from now, and you came over and you offered him $7,000 an acre, he'd be all happy about it. He made $5,000 an acre. That's what's worth. Yeah. So when you look at it from because that's all it's good for is farming. I mean, you can put a park on it, but it's good for nothing else. It's not developable. Mm-hmm. It's farm ground. Yep. It'll rent for about $200 an acre on a good day. Okay. So, I mean, the 9/9 family is going to come out real well on that piece of property, but I think that we overspent.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I respect them. Glad for your expertise, Gary.
Well,
looking forward to hearing more and more from you. Yeah.
We're the board that's going to end up I'm going to be on the board that's going to sign the paper to buy that property when another board approved it.
You won't have to sign anything. We're near close.
But I'm still here.
Yeah. You're here at the time that it closed, and I get your point.
That's correct.
Yeah.
At closing, I'm the board member.
Yeah. You have plausible deniability, Gary. You had nothing to do with it.
That's why it's on record right now.
I'll tell everybody who asked me. All right. All right.
My one thought for discussion is my first board meeting 4 years ago, someone, probably John in his infinite wisdom, gave me the advice to connect with Dan and do a township tour. And on a cold, late fall day, Dan and Rod took me around town, and we went inside of a water tower, and we looked at heights of different fire hydrants and talked about why they're placed where they are, and looked at different sidewalk options and visited the fire department and stopped at the police department. And a lot of those, they gave me this wonderful guided tour around town that helped give me a good knowledge base. So John, thank you for telling me that 4 years ago, because it was a great experience. My one regret is that I didn't dare climb the water tower that day. But it was because I was having a baby and nobody knew that yet. But I would maybe like to now. And so I just wanted to pass that advice along to the other new board members. Dan gives a great tour. Brad has a lot of really great pieces to add to those conversations. We had toured the library too, but it was the old one, so they could take you in the new library and all of those behind-the-scenes pieces. Just don't hesitate to reach out to them for something like that, because it was very informational and eye-opening, and then gave me a good context as we had other conversations over the next 4 years. So I encourage you guys to do the same.
Very good. Ryan, anything?
I think that's great advice. I plan on taking you up on that.
Pass it on to somebody else in 4 years.
So get you at that water tower. It's tight, man. It's tight.
I'm excited for that. So I'm excited for new things and what we have going, and I think we'll work together more and not as much animosity moving forward. But yeah, no, I'm excited for good things moving forward. So
excellent. Catherine, anything?
Yeah. So in preparing for today, it ends up actually tying into something that you just said. In preparing for today, of course I'm an attorney, so I'm going to look at the laws that are involved and everything, and whether we have a charter township or not a charter township makes a difference, that kind of thing. So it's interesting because I never really realized a couple of, I'd say, glitches that we have that I'd really like to see fixed pretty soon. So in looking at what our charter says, on our website, there's a button that says charter, and then if you click on it, it actually doesn't go to anything about a charter, it goes to the preface of the code. It's actually pretty much a page that just looks like this, and it doesn't say anything about charter on it other than the word charter township. And so I think maybe when I moved to the area and I looked at that, I was just assuming there was like a technical glitch, and I didn't really think more about it. And then now that I'm on the board, I was like, well, I need to have the charter, I need to know what we're supposed to follow. And so it sounds like, based on the questions that I was asking, that we didn't actually adopt our own charter, but perhaps we're following the standard charter, if you will, that's kind of found in Chapter 42 of our state laws. If that's true, I think in all fairness and transparency to the people of our community, we need to have that charter. When you click that the link says, we've chosen not to adopt our own charter, but that, we're going along with state law. It's typically found in Chapter 42 and some of Chapter 41 of our Michigan codified laws, because the people also need to have the opportunity to know the rules, essentially, that they're governed by and that we're governed by being in this community. As a part of that, at the bottom of that preface, there's a statement that says, in all capital letters, that it's telling you that there's going to often be times where we perhaps, voted on something and for whatever reason it didn't get onto the website. And so in the event that there's a conflict between what's on the website and something that's just on paper, what's in paper typically governs, is what it says. And also it talks about that the code online may not reflect rules or other regulations that we've essentially put forth. And that's concerning to me, especially since I was wondering about, I had asked some of the questions that had come out about the sewer line thing, and someone on the board had mentioned to me that there was some sort of rule that had been put in place, so I started digging around. Quite frankly, it took a lot of digging and clicking to get to the point where I saw that we actually have a whole list of township board policies. There's actually, by my count, 42 that are still currently enforced. But a lot of us don't really seem to necessarily, know about that or follow them. For example, one of them says that all of our meetings have to start at 7:30 on the board, but it sounds like they haven't started at 7:30 in a long time. But there's a new board member policy, which I didn't realize until basically right before the meeting, because I would have loved to do that. And, I know that Dan's busy, so I kind of asked a couple times while I was here, just like, hey, what's in this area? Just kind of see if that was like a thing. And he just kind of seemed busy, so I was like, I'm not going to push it. And I didn't openly say, hey, Dan, would you take me? And he said, no, that's not what happened. But anyway, now that you said that, we have a board policy from 15 years ago that says that the present board members are supposed to conduct an appropriate orientation program designed to acquaint new board members with the township, board policy, duties, and responsibilities. They're supposed to be, anyway, it's not very long. It's like 5-6 sentences long here. But I was like, wow, that would have been cool. I would have learned a lot of things. And at any rate, so I would value that. I'm glad that you shared that. And so at any rate, I think it's important, though, my point really was, if it was a struggle for me to find the information about what policies we have in place, it's going to be a struggle for anybody in the public, in the public who doesn't serve on the board to find that. And so to the extent that we have our code on our website or, available through a third party, basically by our website, we need to have anything and everything that people are governed by. It needs to be on there. So whether it's considered a board policy or whether there's bylaws to one of our, the planning commission or whatever. I feel very strongly that all of that really should be in one place, so you don't have a scenario where you can say, well, this has some but not all of the rules that the authority has put together. So I would really like to see that that's something that we get on there right away. My only other concern is that we do seriously consider reenacting any decisions that were made in the October meeting, and again, I don't know exactly what those are, but there were some at least, so that we can make sure that any issue that any member of the public might have had that felt like they didn't know what was out there or didn't have a chance to talk about it, they couldn't get on Zoom or something, or, you know, if somebody was slighted by a decision and it ends up being challenged, let's just not even have to go down that road. I would rather see those, you know, reenacted and basically solidified or validated so that it's just not an issue going forward. And that's not something that we could table. That's something that we would have to do in a timely fashion. So those would be my concerns. Obviously, any one of us would much prefer to work in an environment where, you know, we're generally eye to eye. We can have discussions back and forth, that kind of thing, but it's a nice working environment. I think I think that's very important to have, you know, to have a respect and a camaraderie if you can. We all live in the same community, but I also think it's very important that we all stand true to something that, you know, whether it's something about a fact about a property that you know very well yourself, or whether it's about, you know, something that the Constitution requires of us, that it's something that we take very seriously, and it's okay to be the lone vote on something. I mean, I'd prefer not to always be a lone vote, but I'm okay with the fact that I might have to be, because I respect that everybody might be in that position at some point in time. So that's all. Thanks, guys.
I don't think you'd be the lone vote. You weren't much tonight, so I think there'll be people speaking with you. All right, motion to adjourn, anybody?
Motion.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting's adjourned.
You can ask for your post on.
What's that?
Stay a little while.
Oh, I know. Nobody asked if I want to make any comments.
I went like this, man. I went like this. Can you say something?
Hey, how are you?
Thank you.
Again?
My name is Denise.